that is cross-referenced throughout the statutes for various purposes. And this is one of those paragraphs that I think Elizabeth would.
Good morning, Jay.
Hi, Lydia. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I spoke with Lynn about the schedule that you have down for me. I don't need that much time. I need like 10 minutes. Okay.
She told me, but I want to hear all the details. So
Well,
whatever you choose to share.
well, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
believe we are live. I'm going to double check it, but I believe we are live.
Okay. Good.
This is a challenge this morning.
As far as you know,
Make
we're
sure
good.
Scott
Linda?
Bissell gets it.
Yeah. Well, let's assume we're live. Okay. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Marine Resources Committee. Welcome back to Hollywood Squares. We're at least through January meeting totally remotely, other than our session days. Today, we have briefings around the issue of climate change. We have several presenters before us. We'll have some, everybody's familiar with Zoom now, but it's amazing how much you forget in between. So you remember the raise hand and not using the chat for conversations among each other, but raising your hand and speaking to the group. This is a briefing as opposed to a public hearing, so we won't be taking votes today. And at the end, when we finish with the briefing, we'll do a little bit of other housekeeping. Linda has some information for us, and we can talk about what's coming up on our schedule. So let's start with introductions. Senator Meermont.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Dave Meermont, and I'm busy with a few things, so I'm going to just be in the background and might have to step out. And I represent Senate District 12, which is Knox County, except for the town of Washington. Nice to see everyone.
And Representative Hutchins. Representative Hutchins. I hear clicking.
You need to unmute, sir.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute. I'm Sherm Hutchins. I represent District 131 in the Maine legislature. And I had to come into the State House today because my access at my own facility, my own house, couldn't get online.
I'm glad you're here. And Representative Alley.
And those Title 17 sections, warrants, and those are.
Oh, you're muted, Representative.
And some, I think those are victims.
Representative Alley, you're muted.
But right now, the law says.
I don't know who's unmuted, but it's nobody on the screen. I'll come back to you, Representative Alley. Representative Thorne.
You're unmuted.
Well, I guess I'm.
Oh,
Yes.
hang on. Okay, Representative Alley, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Representative Alley from down East Maine, District 138. And we have 12 communities: Jonesport, Beals, Addison, Harrington, Columbia Falls, Centerville, Jonesboro, Whitneyville, and Marshfield. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Thorne, you were muted before.
Good morning. My name is Representative Jim Thorne. I represent District 103, which is Carmel, Herman, and a portion of Etna up in beautiful Penobscot County. And I would also let everybody know that I am the House Republican representative on the Maine Climate Council.
Wonderful. Representative Falkingham.
Good morning. I'm Representative Billy Bob Fockingham from Winter Harbor. I represent House District 136.
Thank you. And our Republican lead on the committee. Representative McDonald.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Genevieve McDonald. I represent House District 134, which is the offshore islands of Penobscot Bay and Western Frenchman's Bay.
Thank you. Representative Crafts.
Good morning. I'm Representative Lydia Crafts. I represent Newcastle, Damascotta, Bristol, Bremen, Monhegan and Louds Islands, and parts of South Bristol and Noblesboro.
Thank you. And Representative Bloom.
Good morning. I'm Representative Lydia Bloom. I represent House District 3 in York.
And Marine Resources is the only committee with 2 Lydias, which is quite an honor. Representative Hepler.
Good morning. I'm Allison Hepler, just back from the dentist. So if I sound a little funny, that's why. I live in Woolwich, representing Woolwich, Aroostook, Georgetown, Phippsburg, Dresden, and part of Richmond.
Thank you. And I think that's all the committee members. I'm Jay McCrite, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and Northeast Brunswick in the House. And I want to introduce and thank our clerk, Linda LaCroix, and our analyst, Lynn Caswell. So on today's agenda, starting with DEP Commissioner Melanie Loisum and Director of Policy Innovation in the Future is Director Hannah Pingree. And are you able to let them in the room?
Sorry, I was distracted for a second. Hannah Pingree. And
Yes.
Who was the other?
I already let the other. I already let
Melanie.
in the DEP commissioner.
Okay,
Well,
wonderful. Thank you.
I thought
And
I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And our topic for this segment is the Maine Climate Council overview, a year 1 progress report, and DEP marine activities such as sea level rise and eelgrass, and anything else you'd like to share. What we're looking for are updates. It looks like this is Hannah Pingree.
Hello, I am going to share my screen for both Commissioner Loisum and I will let her start, just making sure everybody can see my screen.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Can you all hear and see me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having us this morning. It's a pleasure to be here in front of the Marine Resources Committee. I don't think I've presented in front of this group myself in the past, so it's nice to meet those of you that I don't know. It is strange to only be able to see 3 of you. So thanks for hosting us in this Zoom environment. So today we're going to give you an update on a variety of activities that have been happening since passage of Maine Won't Wait, our 4-year plan for action to address climate change in Maine. And so Hannah, if you could start going through the slides. Just a quick reminder, some background on how we got to where we are today. In 2019, legislation was passed into law creating the Maine Climate Council. And that gave us a charge to reach emission reduction goals and to conduct statewide planning. It established a requirement to issue a plan by December 1st of 2020, which has now been published and is available online. And as part of the Climate Council's work, we need to identify strategies to meet our emission reduction goals. Those are to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases by 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% by 2050. So there are some very significant reductions that we need to achieve in the future. Our goal also is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 in accordance with Governor Mills' executive order. And overall, as part of our work also to help make Maine more resilient to the changes that are occurring. Regardless of what we do, there are things we need to be prepared for. Next slide. From our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we've identified that the transportation sector is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the state at 54%. So a variety of our focus from the Climate Council's plan was to reduce transportation-related emissions. Next is emissions from our residential sector. That's our own homes and energy consumption for things like heating and lighting, followed by the commercial sector. And then the smallest contributors are industrial and electric power sector. Next slide. So the Climate Council that was created has 39 members. This is a diverse group of scientists, industry leaders, bipartisan representatives from local and state government. As I said, they have now produced the Climate Action Plan, the first for 4 years in 2020. The council includes 6 working groups. You can see the structure here. It has 230 or more volunteer members. So a tremendous number of Maine citizens that helped contribute to the planning that occurred that led up to our 2020 plan. Notably, we have our scientific and technical subcommittee, specifically created by legislation to serve as an objective, bipartisan, up-to-date assessment of the science around climate change in Maine. They had issued their findings in 2020 and have now produced an update for us in 2021 as well. And then in addition to what was legislated, we've also created the Equity Subcommittee, which also recently released its first set of recommendations that are available on the Climate Council's website. Next slide. As I mentioned, there are a variety of reports now that have been produced as a result of the work of the Climate Council, the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee's assessment, also an analysis of the cost of doing nothing in regards to climate change in Maine, the recent recommendations from the Equity Subcommittee following the assessment that was done by the University of Maine on equity outcomes in Maine, and an energy plan for the state. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Hannah to talk about this more detail on the strategies that are in the Maine Won't Wait plan.
So I'm gonna, nice to see you all again. My name is Hannah Pingree. I'm the director of the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, and co-chair of the Maine Climate Council with Commissioner Loisem. And it is great to see Representative Thorne and Representative Bloom, who are both our 2 main members of the Maine Climate Council from the Maine House. We also have many other legislators who serve on our working groups, including many of you on this Zoom screen. So thank you all for helping to contribute to what we're presenting today. So I'm going to give you kind of the action-packed overview of the strategies and where some of those stand today. Some updates on funding. I won't go into detail. We've provided Lynn with a PDF of this PowerPoint, so you're happy to share the details and ask us more questions. But following our presentations, you're also going to hear from members of our Science and Technical Subcommittee, specifically on some of the marine impacts. You're going to hear from DMR, who's really diving deep on some of the climate activities, and obviously the department that this committee cares the most about. And you're also going to hear a little bit about our work in communities, which again, each of you live in communities who are, many of them, taking action on climate. So we want to make sure you're up to date on that. So for the 8 strategies, just the first 3 are obviously about reducing our emissions in transportation, buildings, in our electricity sector. I think the legislature agrees that there is opportunity to grow clean energy jobs in the state of Maine, but we also need to protect those jobs that are most climate vulnerable, whether they be fishermen, foresters, or farmers. There's tremendous need to protect our natural wildlife, to use our lands to sequester more carbon and prepare our communities for the impacts of climate. And last but not least, we want to make sure that Maine people both understand climate change, but also know about opportunities to save money, whether it's through weatherization, whether it's through other programs the state is offering. So how do we best communicate on the state's climate action plan? So again, I won't go into the deep details, but in the area of transportation, there are 3 main strategies around transitioning to electric vehicles over time, increasing fuel efficiency in the cars that are on the road, alternative fuels, from biofuels to hydrogen, and then also opportunities to reduce the amount we have to drive, whether that be through public transportation options, including in our rural areas, continuing broadband throughout our state. I know Representative Hutchins is there today because there isn't always reliable broadband in our rural areas. as well as land use policies, making sure that people can live in the communities where there are jobs, that a lot happening in that area. Modernizing Maine's buildings, again, a major portion of our emissions. So how do we transition to cleaner heating and cooling systems? How do we continue to weatherize the oldest housing stock in the country where people are most reliant on oil? How do we ensure the new buildings that we're building are as efficient as possible? How do we really emphasize climate-friendly building products? We know that Maine's wood products industry is really ready and already on the way to building everything from wood fiber insulation, more timber products like CLT. So we see huge innovation and opportunity in climate-friendly building products as being a real economic opportunity for Maine. And then how we also lead by example, whether it's in our state buildings and our energy usage to our community buildings and schools. Reducing emissions in our energy sector, obviously a major area where Maine has already led. Maine, many of you, I'm sure, voted for the 2019 increase in our renewable portfolio standard, which requires our grid to have 80% renewable energy by 2030 and a goal of 100% by 2050. Next, growing our clean energy economy and protecting our natural resource industries. The governor set a goal in the climate plan of doubling clean energy jobs by 2030. These are both renewable energy jobs, but the major part of this sector right now are energy efficiency jobs, people who are doing weatherization, energy efficiency work in our industrial sector and in our small businesses. So obviously this is a major part of the governor's goal, but I don't want to de-emphasize, and you'll probably hear more from Commissioner Kelleher today, the importance of protecting those industries that are most climate vulnerable. Again, I mentioned forestry, farming, and fishing, really the sort of heritage industries of our state, and we've put tremendous investment in those industries and ensuring they can last for the long term in a time of a changing climate. Protecting Maine's environment and working lands while also promoting natural climate solutions is a major part of the state's climate plan. We are a state that is 90% forested. We are the most forested in the country. Keeping those forest lands working and sequestering carbon is hugely important to the state's climate plan. But there are also opportunities, including blue carbon opportunities, to sequester more carbon in our coastal lands, in seaweed aquaculture and kelp. So we see tremendous opportunity in this area. Ensuring that our communities are healthy and resilient to climate impacts. I'm sure that Representative McDonald recognizes this causeway between Deer Island, Stonington. Obviously, we know that the impacts of rising sea levels are important to plan for and ensure especially our coastal, but also our inland communities are prepared for. So you'll hear more toward the end of this morning about the kinds of resilience tools that we want to support communities. We don't want to tell communities what to do, but we want to support their ability to adapt. And we are already seeing increasing impacts from climate. So on that front, investing in climate-ready infrastructure is a major part of our current focus, working closely with DOT and many of the other state agencies. I don't know if this is in any of your districts, but this was just from last spring, a washed out road in Gouldsboro. Obviously, we've seen major precipitation events even in this last year that have caused pretty significant impacts on our infrastructure. So helping communities avoid this, obviously, this is a huge public safety challenge. It's an economic challenge. So ensuring our communities are ready with infrastructure that's able to withstand the kinds of changes we are seeing, incredibly important. Last, again, but not least, engaging with Maine people and communities about climate impacts and opportunities. As the state works with businesses, works with towns, works with students, we want to be sure that we're using the best science. We are communicating with people about the impacts in their communities and that they're aware of the programs that are now available to them. So we launched a new website on December 1, Maine Won't Wait. And it is about just making sure that people are clear that there are opportunities now for businesses to become more efficient, that we have a new program for communities that you'll hear more about this morning. So encourage you to check out that new website, mainewon'twait.org. So on December 1 at the University of Maine at Orono, we did our most recent Climate Council meeting, our first year anniversary of the climate plan, and we rolled out our first 1-year progress report. Probably we want to be very clear about what we're achieving. There's lots of plans, but we want this plan to be about action. So we rolled out our first Maine weight tracking dashboard that we will update on a regular basis. We happy to share this with you. It's available on our website, but this includes a variety of different measures, again, across several of the major strategies about reducing our emissions, from transition to electric and hybrid vehicles, installation of heat pumps, weatherization, our path to 80% clean energy, where we are on jobs, as well as land conservation. Melanie will talk a little bit more about it at the end, but really the ultimate test of our progress is how we're doing on reducing our emissions. And again, that report you'll hear from Melanie is coming out later this year. So I'm not going to go into deep detail on these slides. Some of you have seen some of the publications our office has put out. But I will say, when we put this plan out a little over a year ago, we weren't exactly sure how we would pay for the climate plan. In the course of the last year, with the help of the Maine legislature, as well as the Congress, we have seen the bipartisan federal infrastructure bill, as well as the American Rescue Plan, as well as the state budget, offer tremendous opportunities for climate action. So again, this is just a rundown of some of the major highlights, specifically on transportation, everything from climate resilience to EV charging now available. In the area of buildings and efficiency, we are making significant new investments in energy efficiency, especially for low-income residents and businesses, but for people across the board. We've also seen significant funding from the federal government on this same front. In the area of clean energy jobs, the Governor's Energy Office is really focused on supporting Maine people transitioning into these careers. We're working closely with the Maine Community College system to train energy auditors, to train heat pump installers, lots of good opportunity in this sector. And last but not least, on climate resilience, the federal infrastructure bill has the most funding, especially for the Department of Transportation. A real focus on new transportation infrastructure needs to be climate resilient. You'll also hear more later this morning about a new $20 million adaptation fund available to communities. The state legislature put $40 million into the Land for Maine's Future program. I think Commissioner Kelleher, who's the chair of that board, will hit on that. Obviously, important for our communities, but especially important for our working waterfronts, where some of that money is devoted. And we also specifically put money into supporting communities. Again, not telling them what to do, but allowing them to make their own plan and receive funding to help make those plans possible. So I will pass it back to Melanie for a little bit more specific work on what is happening at DEP.
Thanks, Anna. Representative Bloom last year introduced LD 1572. We have recently reported out our findings as a result of the analysis that was called for. That was a resolve to analyze the impact of sea level rise. This was a recommendation coming out of the Climate Council that as a state, we need to be planning for changes to sea level as identified by our Science and Technical Subcommittee. A variety of agencies were involved in this analysis, and we've combined the results of that into the document that's been submitted to the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. And I and some others from Department of Agriculture, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine Emergency Management Agency, and others will be presenting that to ENR next week. So thank you to Representative Bloom for bringing that forward last year. I think that that's given us the opportunity to make some important recommendations as a result of that. We've identified changes in the Site Location of Development Act, in the standards around harmonious fit with the surrounding environment that we're recommending be updated to incorporate consideration of sea level rise. Implementation of that is going to require much more detailed rulemaking by the department. There'll be a substantial stakeholder engagement process to look at the details of those changes that we need to make. But this is going to be a really important step forward to help us make sure that when we're permitting development along our coastlines and in areas that we see significant inundation, that consideration is given to those impacts when people are making investments. Also through the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry, we're going to be working more with Representative Bloom, looking at her proposals for municipal planning and improving planning at the local level. And I think there's going to be further discussion around that related to LD 1616 and a potential nexus for what we've recommended under LD 1572. Next. I wanted to give you all a quick update on what's going on with seagrass and salt marsh vegetation. Thank you to Representative McCrate for finally getting this work funded on behalf of the state. We now have funding and a plan for mapping eelgrass and coastal marshlands along the entire coastline of Maine every 5 years. This is going to be an incredibly useful data set for us to use all collectively to analyze the health of eelgrass. It is an important part of our marine ecosystem. It sequesters blue carbon and it supports our fisheries. Known stressors to eelgrass include shading, scouring, and invasive species. DEP, DMR, and others have mapped eelgrass beds on portion of the coastline in the past as resources were available. But with this new funding, we'll now be able to do this on a regular basis and see the changes that are happening over time. This is going to be really important also for our restoration and conservation efforts. We are going to be generating low tide aerial imagery that will be available online. Go ahead, Hannah, next slide. So this will all be posted through the Maine Geo Library. It will also include information that was collected in 2021. Mapping was done of the southern Maine coastline. We're just waiting for those processed images to be available for our review, and then they'll be available publicly in a couple of months. Then this summer, staff will be mapping seagrass, Cape Elizabeth to Phippsburg, and getting ready to start the 5-year cycle starting in the Mid-Coast region in 2023. We'll also be bringing on 2 additional new staff that have been funded to be able to help us with this work. And then a fun note, we're also working with some volunteers down in the Portland area. The imagery here is a picture of a diver out doing the seagrass mapping. And I believe that this may be Team Zostera or our staff here in the picture on the side. It's a little hard to tell who's who when they're in diving equipment. Next. And then we are working with a variety of organizations on compiling, collecting data, sharing information, establishing standardized methodologies so that we can all maximize the information that's being collected. Also focusing additional research based on the results that we're seeing, not just from the seagrass mapping, but also through biomonitoring and water quality monitoring. And DEP and these organizations are also sharing information regionally with our neighboring states and with EPA. So I've included here a link to information that would be available not just for Maine, but for the entire New England region. And we will be updating that with our most recent data set this year as well. Next. Then more broadly, regarding greenhouse gas emissions, the department is required to produce a report December 1st, 2022 of the statewide inventory. We had promised we are going to provide a report at the beginning of this year because everybody would really like to have the numbers. But EPA model that's a big part to generate our overall statewide inventory. They're in the process of updating the model with the most recent data right now. And so as soon as we get that from them, we're going to be able to plug it into our calculations. The report issuing in the next month or two, hopefully, is going to give us an updated look through its data year 2019. So it'd be the last year before the plan went into effect. We're always a couple of years the inventory, it's just the way it works. But this can reported actual emissions from our licensed facilities. And we estimate emissions from all other activities that really.
We lost you, Melanie, or is it just me?
No, it's your sound was going in and out. Now we're not hearing you at all.
Commissioner Loisam's microphone is now broken. She's gonna have to quit Zoom for the day.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Our inventory will be available online. It will contain all the information that I noted on the slide. We will, for the first time, also be estimating carbon sequestration that's being achieved by Maine's forests, captured in our wood products, and as much of the blue carbon as we're able to calculate at this time. And we're very excited that the work that we're going to be doing with coastline monitoring for both the marshlands and our intertidal areas is going to significantly contribute to our understanding of our blue carbon inventory in the future. And I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Hannah.
I have nothing more. I will just say, I think we're going to pass it off to two folks to present on the science. We started a little late, but I think Melanie and I are happy to answer any questions or press on, whatever the chairs would like.
Thank you both. Are you going to be with us for the rest, or do you have to go?
I have to leave at 11, my apologies, but I'm here until then.
Okay, could we then check with the committee to see questions or comments from this portion of the presentation? Representative Falkingham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just took some notes during that presentation, and I guess I will go ahead and I have a question. It's the goal is to be carbon neutral by 2045. Where are we at right now, and what's the significance of that date? That's my question.
You want me to go ahead, Hannah?
Go for it, Melanie. You're the one about to put out the report, which will tell us where we are.
Well, I can tell you, I think, how we're doing in terms of meeting the goal. I think we're about 75% of the way there with our existing carbon stocks. We're refining those numbers, but that was the last estimate that I've heard. We will be putting out a definitive estimate in the next couple of months in that upcoming report. And for 2045, that was in the governor's executive order. Hannah, I don't know if you can speak to the relative timing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent question. I think many of the states around the country on a bipartisan basis, as well as countries around the world, are committing to goals in the 2040 to 2050 timeframe, where we know we need to take significant action. So that date was picked. I think, as the commissioner just mentioned, I think Maine is likely to be ahead of that date because I think we are a state that has tremendous forest capacity and sequestration capacity. So we may be ahead of it, but again, the DEP's annual reports will help us understand exactly where we are.
Thanks for the answer. Can I just have a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Hannah, I know it's a pretty complicated issue because there's a lot of factors into what carbon neutrality actually is, but I've heard people say that because of our 90% forestation and our low population, and also because of hydropower and other, sorts of carbon-free energy, that we may be carbon neutral already if you, depending on how you figure it up. Could you maybe just respond to that, or talk a little bit about what exactly carbon neutrality is, at least in your view?
Yeah, and I do think the DEP's report this year, when it comes out in the next couple of months, will be the first one to really tell us where we estimate we are. We don't know yet. We don't think we are fully carbon neutral, but again, I think that's what the DEP's report will do. So I think Maine still has to meet an 80% emission reduction goal of our gross emissions. So all of the emissions we have from our cars, our homes, and our industries, we still have to reduce those by 80% by 2050 based on the new law. So by 2050, or in the time frame, we still will be emitting some, and we need that to be sequestered in our lands, whether it be our forest lands or our other natural lands. So Maine is in a good position. Exactly. I mean, you have it right. We are a state that sequesters a lot of carbon. We're an important state for the rest of the region, and there may be financial benefits for our foresters, our farmers, and others because we do sequester so much as a state. But essentially, again, we need to reduce our emissions by 80%, and then the rest of that 20% we're still emitting needs to be sequestered. So that's what carbon neutrality means. Other states, other countries around the world have kind of, more complicated schemes, but I think Maine's is fairly simple in that we need to still reduce our emissions, and then those emissions we still have, we want to be sequestering them. We have, again, as you noted, by 2045 we want to be carbon neutral. You're not wrong that we might be there much sooner. We don't think we're there now.
Thank you.
Melanie, did I get that right? You're the expert.
You did, and I'll spare you the wonky answer, but for anyone who's interested in the details of the actual calculation methodology, the Department and Board of Environmental Protection publish the methodology that we'll be using in a department rule chapter. So for anyone who's interested in that, I believe it's chapter 167 of DEP's rules.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other hands, let's move on. Our next speakers, briefers, I should say, are Dr. Cassandra Rose and Dr. Susie Arnold, who are part of the Maine Climate Council Science and Technical Subcommittee. And I don't think they're on yet.
I'm bringing them on now, Representative.
There's Dr. Rose and Dr. Arnold. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And the topic is climate science update with marine science focus. You all have great.
And everybody, Representative McCreight, can you hear me?
Yes, and we
Thank
can
you.
see the screen.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, Senator Marymount, Representative McCreight, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Marine Resources. Thank you for inviting us here this morning. I'm Dr. Cassandra Rose from the Governor's Office Policy Innovation in the Future, and I'm joined by Dr. Susie Arnold of the Island Institute and member of the Maine Climate Council. I'm the Maine Climate Council coordinator and senior science analyst in GOPIF, and I'm privileged to work closely with the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of the MCC, which Dr. Arnold co-chairs. So much of the information we're discussing this morning has been summarized by the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, or STS, a group of more than 30 respected scientists in the state of Maine with extensive experience in studying Maine's climate and ocean systems, forests, farms, economy, public health, and much more. The STS was created in statute as part of the Maine Climate Council, as Commissioner Loisem detailed earlier, and was charged with identifying the impacts of climate change in Maine. Their 2020 scientific assessment of climate change, which is part of the State Climate Action Plan, provides a comprehensive assessment of the latest science of climate change and all of its impacts. And their 2021 update, released late last year, provides a short overview of relevant science released since that 2020 report. Today, we will cover just a few of the major impacts that climate change is already having in Maine and is projected to have in the future. However, there are quite a few more that are detailed in these two reports in fantastic detail. So today we'll be talking about climate trends. Climate is usually the average of 30 years or so of observations, or to use the old adage, climate is what you expect and weather is what you get on a day-to-day basis. Earth's climate is changing and warming today, driven primarily by rising greenhouse gases. The leading cause of that warming is rising carbon dioxide, or CO2 concentrations in our atmosphere, which have gone up over 50% since the mid-1800s, primarily from burning fossil fuels. Greenhouse gases help keep Earth's surface warm as part of the greenhouse effect, but when they rise in our atmosphere, they trap additional outgoing radiation or heat and raise global temperatures. Despite being a small percentage of Earth's atmosphere, CO2's properties allow it to absorb much more of Earth's outgoing infrared radiation or heat, having an outsized contribution to the greenhouse effect. The current rate of rising greenhouse gas emissions is incredibly fast, unprecedented in human history and perhaps even Earth history. Current CO2 levels are the highest that Earth has experienced in at least 2 to 3 million years. So reducing the rate of greenhouse gas emissions is fundamental to minimizing the amount of warming and climate change in the decades and centuries to come. Reducing emissions will help prevent Earth's average temperatures from rising to levels not experienced by humans or ecosystems for millions of years. So this graph here on the left shows temperature change in Maine over the last century or so. While temperatures globally have increased about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius, like the rest of the northeastern United States, Maine's land temperatures have increased even more rapidly, going up over 3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1895. In that time, coastal areas have warmed more than the interior of the state. And of all the seasons, today notwithstanding, winters in Maine have warmed the most, which has caused Maine's growing season to increase by 2 weeks and earlier lake ice outs and snowpack melt in the spring. Warming temperatures bring both potential benefits from longer growing seasons and lower heating costs, but also potential damages from heat stress, greater cooling costs, and impacts to public and ecosystem health. The Gulf of Maine is currently warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans. And I just saw a new paper that came out today that the world ocean had its very warmest year on record in 2021. This continued warming will result in additional warmer water species and fewer subarctic species in the Gulf of Maine, an ecosystem shift that will affect our marine resources and coastal communities, as well as important industries like commercial fishing and aquaculture. Warming in the future depends on humanity's ability to curb greenhouse gas emissions. On the left side of this graph are historical Maine temperatures until 2020, which we just saw in the last slide. But the three colorful lines on the right-hand side show the different potential future temperature pathways. These future temperatures are based on low, intermediate, and high greenhouse gas emission scenarios from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 5th Climate Assessment Report. The blue at the bottom assumes that net zero emissions are achieved by 2050, and to address Representative Felkingham's question before, net neutrality by 2050 will ensure that global temperatures will not rise beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. That's where that target comes from. So these pathways suggest that Maine may warm by an additional 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050 and up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the highest scenario by 2100, depending on the success in curbing greenhouse gas emissions. They make it clear that in higher emission scenarios, green and red, Maine's climate will be much hotter than if net zero emissions are achieved globally by mid-century, shown in blue. The shaded areas behind these lines also show that temperatures and precipitation alongside it may become more variable, with extreme hot and extreme cold weather events occurring. So as average temperatures rise in Maine, very hot or high heat index days will happen more frequently. The map on the right shows current heat vulnerability throughout the state from the State Climate Plan's vulnerability analysis, with the redder colors showing higher vulnerability to heat by zip code based on socioeconomic and demographic factors. High heat index days are likely to be 4 times more frequent by the 2050s, causing both direct and indirect costs to rise to the state of Maine. Direct costs are expected to rise between 9 and 14 times higher by 2050 and 13 to 26 times higher by 2100. Warming is also causing Maine to become wetter overall, with statewide annual precipitation, rain, and snowfall increasing by 6 inches on average since 1895. With greater warming can come more unpredictable rainfall and snowfall, with both short-term droughts and more frequent severe storms striking without much warning. Heavy storms of 2 to 4 degrees of 2 to 4 inches of precipitation are becoming more frequent in Maine, which increases the probability of floods in smaller watersheds that can erode infrastructure and degrade water quality in wells and public water sources, ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, and coastal areas. The pictures on this slide show the impacts of several storms that have affected Maine in the last year and a half alone. So although the science is not entirely clear yet on the trajectory of Maine's future flood frequency with warming, if large floods do become more abundant, there are thousands of jobs at risk in river and coastal corridors, as well as more than 1 billion of Maine's annual GDP, according to the State Climate Plan's vulnerability analyses. So climate change is expected to affect all sectors of Maine's economy, from tourism, fishing, agriculture and forestry, to transportation and trade. Warmer temperatures, more rain, and sea level rise will increase the incidence of flooding and damage to property and infrastructure, and will also shift the natural ranges of Maine's plant and animal species and habitats. A recent study in Science also modeled the impacts of climate change on generations born in 1960 versus 2020, and found that the younger generations will experience 4 to 7 times more extreme climate-related events than older generations. They also found that the exposure goes up considerably with higher degrees of warming. So there are many, many more details than I was able to include today available in the Maine Climate Council's cost benefit and vulnerability analyses and the STS reports, but we would be happy to share these reports with the committee members after this presentation if that's of interest. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Dr. Susie Arnold.
Great, thank you, Dr. Rose. I hope that you'll advance the slides for me, is that correct? And maybe you could use your pointer to highlight some of the areas on this map as I'm speaking, if that's possible for the group to see that pointer. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk about some ocean climate science. These are new findings from 2021 that I'll be discussing in the next 15 minutes. So first topic I wanted to touch on are changes in ocean circulation in our region that are having impacts on the Gulf of Maine. So just a little bit of background. If you're looking at this map here, Cassie, if you could show folks, orient them to the Gulf of Maine, that's GOM, kind of in the middle. Yep. And then you've got the Northeast Channel as NEC right there. And then outside there, you've got the Gulf Stream. This is that warm current coming up from the south. And another important landmark on this map is the blue current coming down from Canada. That's the Labrador Current. And then the TGRB, that stands for the tail of the Grand Banks right there. So those are some landmarks that you'll need to be familiar with in this slide. So just a little bit of background on science that we have known for about a decade. We know Arctic warming and accelerating ice melt from Greenland is weakening a major Atlantic Ocean current referred to as the AMOC. This stands for the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. We know that this weakening AMOC is linked with a northward shift of the Gulf Stream and a retreat of the Labrador Current, which is resulting in warmer water entering the Gulf of Maine through the Northeast Channel. So some new insights that were brought to our attention in a publication in 2021 are very relevant to the Gulf of Maine. So this study found that beginning in 2008, the Gulf Stream indeed migrated closer to the tail of the Grand Banks, which reduced the input of the Labrador Current. And now that's the current that's carrying the colder, fresher water down from Canada. Now, within 1 year of that warmer, saltier water at the tail of the Grand Banks, we began to observe that subsurface warming progressing in the Gulf of Maine. So this study has helped us to interpret some of the rapid temperature change we've seen in the Gulf of Maine. And it also gives us the ability to simulate those current interactions. So simulate how the Gulf Stream and Labrador Current interactions are happening, and gives us the ability to predict some future warming in the Gulf of Maine. Next slide, please. So as for ocean temperature, we have been tracking it in the Gulf of Maine going back to the 1880s. So what you're looking at here is annual average sea surface temperature. This is part of the new Maine Climate Science Dashboard, which is an interactive dashboard showing you land temperature trends, ocean temperature trends, and sea level rise. So this is showing you annual average sea surface temperature from 1880, that squiggly line there, yep, thank you, Cassie, up to present day. And the gray dash line is showing you the historical average temperature to date, which is 48.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, for context, if you looked at the rolling average of sea surface of the last 12 months in the Gulf of Maine, it's 3.8 degrees higher than that historical average. So it's 3.8 degrees higher over the last 12 months. Now, the squiggly lines going off beyond 2021, those are sea surface temperature projections based on 3 different emissions scenarios. If you look at to the highest emission scenario out to 2050, which is that vertical black line there, it's showing you that in the Gulf of Maine, we can expect a temperature of 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That would make down East Maine coastal temperatures similar to southern New England today. Next slide, please. So while southern New England temperatures might sound nice for swimming, they are not, they're doing crazy things for marine species. They're changing the distribution and abundance of species. So probably most well-known and well understood is how that warming is impacting the Maine lobster fishery. So this is looking at American lobster biomass, basically the number of lobsters caught per tow. The left panel is from 1972. The right panel is just from a few years ago in 2019. The reds and the dark oranges and the yellows, those are hot spots of biomass and abundance, showing you where lobsters were most prevalent in 1972 and comparing that to their distribution and abundance in 2019. So showing a stark contrast in the distribution and abundance of this important commercial species. Next slide, please. So warming is not just impacting the distribution and abundance of species, but it's also causing major disruptions in predator-prey dynamics. So we've learned a lot over the last decade. What we've learned more recently is that marine species are really sensitive. Marine species have higher sensitivities to warmer and faster rates of colonization than terrestrial species. Local extirpations related to warming have been twice as common in the ocean as on land, and species turnover in the ocean is faster. The picture that you're looking at comes from a publication from 2021. Lead author was Andy Pershing, former lead scientist at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Other co-authors were from other Maine institutions. And it's basically a review of climate impacts on the Gulf of Maine ecosystem, and they discuss observed and expected changes in 2050 from rising temperatures. So if you look over at the right panel, what you can see is that the authors project changes in populations of important organisms in the Gulf of Maine. So they're predicting declines by 2045 in the lobster population, declines in cod, declines in the important Calanus finmarchicus, which is go up. Yeah, there you go. Yep, that's the zooplankton that is really at the base of the marine food web in Maine. It's an important prey species for so many marine organisms in Maine, including the next fish up there. That's herring, so declines in herring. And then you see that horizontal arrow next to the whale. Authors are predicting changes in distribution of the right whale in large part due to those declines in zooplankton. So we also see some upward trending arrows, and those are around black sea bass and long-fin squid. And those are warm water species that are projected to increase in abundance in the Gulf of Maine going forward. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a couple of examples. We have some new insights on a few different kind of timely, relevant topics to the committee. One is in regards to our formerly robust northern shrimp fishery, which, as you probably know, was closed in 2013. Some new evidence that was published in 2021 gives us some more information about why that fishery was really decimated. So it's more than just fishing, it's more than just warming, it has to do with a new predator. The voracious longfin squid actually entered the Gulf of Maine. This is the lower left panel. You can see that the squid entered the Gulf of Maine earlier in 2012 with the early onset of spring conditions. So we had more squid showing up early, coinciding with the female shrimp breeding inshore in Gulf of Maine. And then if you go to the lower right panel, you can see that in 2012 and 2013, there was just more squid in general in those offshore waters. So what resulted, according to this publication, is that there was just an unmanageable level of predation of the squid on these shrimp, which contributed to the collapse of that fishery. And as you well know, the fishery has not yet been reopened. Next slide, please. So this is a really important publication that came out in 2021 relating to impacts of changing ocean conditions on the North Atlantic right whale. You guys are all probably pretty familiar with how the endangered right whale is trending and how that's impacting the lobster fishery. Something that is less well known, I think, is how climate change is impacting the right whale. So this paper specifically looked at the decade before this warming regime that occurred in around 2009, 2010, and looked at the kind of the health of the right whale in that decade following. So from 2010 to 2019. So if you look over on the left in the green here, authors identified that the Gulf Stream hadn't yet shifted to the north, so there was more coolness, so less warm water entering the Northeast Channel in the Gulf of Maine. And so there was still this higher prey availability, so more of those Calanus finmarchicus, that zooplankton available for the right whales. It's their primary food source. And so we saw right whales doing their kind of traditional summer foraging in the Gulf of Maine, particularly in the Bay of Fundy. And the right whale exhibited higher calving and lower mortality rates during that decade. So fast forward here to 2010 to 2019, we know that the Gulf Stream had migrated, causing more warm water to enter the Gulf of Maine, causing a lower prey availability for the right whales. The right whales shifted their summer foraging to be more in the Gulf of St. Lawrence instead of the Gulf of Maine. And then the right whale exhibited lower calving and higher mortality rates during this decade. So these are some pretty big outcomes from this paper around impacts of changing ocean condition on that endangered species. Next slide, please. So I'm going to shift gears quite a bit right now to talk more about some of the physical impacts of climate change and talk about how we can prepare for sea level rise, what the state of Maine is doing, and some new science that provides some caution in how we plan. So essentially, as was mentioned earlier, the state of Maine is mandated now to plan for the intermediate scenario of sea level rise, and that is 1 feet of relative rise by 2050 and 4 feet of sea level rise by 2100. I think you can advance the slide, Cassie, because it will show those numbers on the curve. So the squiggly line here, and let me back up one sec. So this is also part of that climate science dashboard that you guys can all go to, and it shows data from, in this case, 3 of Maine's tide gauges, and you can look at the historical data and then the scenarios that are projected out for the future. So the squiggly line is the historical data. This is what we've observed. And then that lower kind of non-squiggly line is showing you the intermediate scenario. And so that is what Hannah and Melanie have said that the state is preparing for and changing our laws and regulations to agree with that planning target. Now, the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee and the Maine Climate Council also recommended that the state prepare to manage for the high scenario. And the high scenario, I think you can click now, is 3 feet of sea level rise by 2050 and 8.8 feet by 2100. Next slide, please. So just to back up for a moment here, I wanted to talk about the causes of sea level change and some new insights. We know that sea level is primarily driven by volumetric increase. What that means is basically the volume of the ocean is increasing because of melting land ice. We also know that thermal expansion is contributing. What that means is as the waters warm, they expand. But there's also a number of other drivers that are important. We demonstrated in last year's STS report that ocean circulation can play a role locally, and the weakening AMOC that I discussed earlier is actually playing a role in raising sea levels in the Gulf of Maine. There are also atmosphere ocean interactions that can be important. Next slide, please. And one that has been revealed to me by people smarter than I around sea level rise has to do with this natural cycle called the lunar nodal cycle. And what this is it's a natural cycle of the orbits of the Earth and the Moon that exaggerate and mute tides on Earth, and thus enhance or suppress the effects of sea level rise. Now, what we know is that currently we're actually in a downward phase of the lunar nodal cycle, which reduces impacts of sea level rise over the next few years. And what's important to know is that after 2025, we'll start the upward phase of this cycle. And by 2030 or sooner, the rate of sea level rise will likely rise significantly over the linear trend for over a decade. So what's important to take home here is that any possible reprieve should not mask the fact that it will be replaced by an even faster rate. Next slide, please. So what is particularly unsettling to me about that is the fact that we've broken all sorts of records in 2021. So Maine has 6 tide gauges. Some have been in place for nearly a century, one over a century, and others for less time. So basically, what this table is showing you is, according to tide gauges, the highest average monthly sea levels. So what year was the highest January recorded? And as I mentioned, these go back to in some cases, the early 1900s, but you don't see any early 1900s dates on this table. You see a lot of dates from the last decade, and you see a lot of red, a lot of 2021. So the important take home here is that we're already breaking records, and I won't list them all to you, but many of them have been broken in 2021, and the December data should be out any day now. Next slide, please. So only one more piece of bad news from me, but it's important as we think about preparing for coastal flooding, and that's new insights that have come out last year around changes in storm tracks and activity. So just a little bit of background, what we already have come to understand about tropical cyclones on a warming planet are a few things. We know that they're increasing in occurrence and intensity, especially the most intense tropical cyclones, that increases in precipitation are associated with tropical cyclones, and that increased storm surge flooding is associated with tropical cyclones. The new insights from last year from a couple different publications have to do with the direction and the characteristics of these tropical cyclones. Their tracks are shifting poleward and westward, which is potentially impacting unprepared regions like the northeast coast of the United States that aren't typically affected by intense tropical cyclones. Also, tropical cyclone activity close to land is increasing, and we're seeing increased stalling of Atlantic tropical cyclones. So this has substantial increases in threats to coastal regions, especially in the form of increased precipitation because of the stalling. Next slide, please. So I wanted to end on a high note before I conclude. We've talked a little bit earlier today about some blue carbon habitats and their importance in carbon carbon sequestration. And so those blue carbon habitats are salt marshes and eelgrass beds and also seaweeds. So this slide is coming from a paper last year about advances in climate services of farmed seaweeds. And I mention this because we have an expansive coastline here in Maine. We've had great successes in farming seaweed thus far. And there's a number of different research efforts that are underway that pertain to the climate services of farmed seaweed. One is its ability to remediate ocean acidification through temporary capture of carbon dioxide in the ocean. One has to do with the potential for carbon sequestration underneath seaweed farms. And another has to do with using kelp as a food additive for cows to reduce their methane burps. Now, we know methane is a big greenhouse gas that contributes a great deal to climate change. Some other important things about farm seaweed that are already happening is its use for food, which can substitute other food products with larger carbon footprints. And also it can be used for bioenergy and also bioplastics. So there's lots of exciting climate services that could be relevant to Maine in the future. Next slide. So finally, to conclude, I wanted to tie in a common theme between two reports. One you're very familiar with on the right, one you may be less familiar with, but you probably heard about the release of the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report, which came out, their 6th assessment came out in August this summer. And the themes between the two reports are really identifying the urgency to act now. So quoting the IPCC report in the blue here, it says, basically, this is going to be the last IPCC report that will be released while the world still has time to avoid the worst of our possible climate futures beyond 1.5 degrees C of global warming after 2050. However, that requires society to immediately cut greenhouse gas emissions to be able to achieve carbon neutrality by around 2050. So as we discussed, Maine is on that path. We're taking the right approach. I know I just mentioned a lot of depressing trends and lots of bad news, but what's important to remember is the rates of continued change can be decreased or reversed for all of these indicators of climate change with deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So in closing, we know what needs to be done, and I think Maine can take a great leadership role in demonstrating how we can get there and share that message with other rural states and other areas of the globe. Thank you.
Thank you both. Questions, comments from the committee? Representative McDonald.
Thank you. I just want to say hello to Dr. Arnold and how nice it is to see you. And thank you for that robust presentation.
Thanks, Genevieve. Nice to see you too.
Dr. Arnold, could you repeat where you're from? You're on the subcommittee, but that isn't, you're also somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm a co-chair of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, and I'm a recent appointee to the Maine Climate Council. I work as a marine scientist at the Island Institute, and I live in Bath.
Great, thank you. And the slides that we saw, the Climate Council, we are familiar with, as you said, but the other slides that you showed, are those available to us?
Yes, Representative. I've shared them with the committee staff. They should be distributed very soon.
Great, thank you. I know my community is doing a lot of work on these issues, and hopefully some of the members of the Climate Resilience Committee are listening, and I'm sure they're going to want to see those, so thank you. Other comments, questions? Lynn, our analyst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that the materials from today's presentation are also posted on the committee's webpage, but I will send them out again.
And under committee materials, probably?
Under committee materials, under presentations.
Great, thank you. Representative Hepler.
Hi, thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I wanted to say that I've been working with Kennebec Estuary Land Trust on salt marshes as an element of sort of calming sea level rise, but also carbon sequestration, right? Is that, yeah. It's good work.
Yeah.
Agreed. They're doing some groundbreaking work. Yeah, it's really great.
Seeing no more hands, thank you both. That was, yes, depressing and hopeful at the same time. Thank you. Good to see you both. And next, we have Commissioner Kelleher and staff, an overview of climate planning, fisheries impacts, and working waterfronts. Thank you for joining us, Commissioner.
Oh, happy to be here, Representative McCreight. Representative McCreight. I'm going to lose my mind here. Representative McCreight, Senator Miramont, members of the committee. I am just a reminder, in case you forgot, I'm Pat Kelleher, Commissioner at the Department of Marine Resources, and Hannah Pingree is distracting me with text messages telling me not to look so serious. And I said, well, it's a damn serious topic, so I'm trying to be serious. So. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to you folks because I want my subject matter experts to kind of give an overview of what we're working on. What you will not hear necessarily embedded into what they're going to talk to you about today is the work that also happens from a fisheries management perspective at both ASMFC and the New England Fisheries Management Council. So that is work that is very much focused on climate change as fisheries management plans continue to change. And as Dr. Arnold mentioned in her presentation, the issues around shifting species and declining species is certainly on the forefront of everything we're doing with those two fisheries management bodies. So what we want to do today is I'm going to have Kathleen Layden, who is our division director of the Maine Coastal Program. Carl Wilson then will follow her with a presentation on the Bureau of Marine Science, followed by Bureau Director Cole Canwet. And then we're going to wrap it up with just a quick update and overview of the working waterfront. You're going to hear a lot about working waterfront associated with sea level rise. We just want to do a quick refresher with the committee on the role of the working waterfront. It's a critically important piece of what we do through the Lands for Maine Future program. It's not something that's necessarily in front of you guys a lot, but just thought it was important to highlight some of the work that's ongoing. So with that, I'm going to ask Deidre Gilbert will give that presentation as well, but I'll ask Deidre if she would be willing to share her screen, and then I'm going to turn it right over to Kathleen. And then when we finish this presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions if you'd like to entertain a few.
Are folks seeing just the slideshow?
Yep, we got it, Deidre. Okay. So Kathleen, you're up. Has she been invited in? I guess is the question.
I'm moving her in now.
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Need to cue the Jeopardy music while we're waiting.
I usually sing it, but you don't want to hear that.
Okay, here I am.
Hey, there
Thanks,
she is.
Commissioner. Good morning, everybody. Senator Mirmont, Representative McCrate, thanks for asking DMR to present today. As Pat said, I direct the Coastal Program, which is in the Commissioner's office at DMR. We've been at DMR for about 3 years. The program's been around since 1978. We're a NOAA-funded program that really works across both agency lines and issue lines to focus on coastal management priorities. And by coastal, we mean that coastal and marine edge. I also had the privilege of co-chairing the Coastal and Marine Working Group of the Maine Climate Council with my colleague Heather Leslie, Dr. Heather Leslie from the University of Maine. So very happy that the working group recommendations are reflected in the Climate Council report, and we've been doing a lot of work that I just have 2 slides, and I'm going to breeze through these because I know we have a lot to cover in this section. So for the Coastal Program, and this is somewhat mapped to the Climate Council goals that Hannah Pingree and Commissioner Loisem presented earlier. So the first is protecting Maine's natural lands and waters and working lands and waters. Towards that end, the Coastal Program has 2 local grant programs that we have run for more than 20 years now. And we've adjusted them slightly so that they're competitive grants. We've adjusted the requirements slightly that we've asked applicants, either coastal towns or coastal regional planning commissions, to address the goals of the Climate Council in their projects. So that's been super interesting. And under that new emphasis, we've funded 11 coastal town and regional planning commission grants, along with the Department of DACF. And for the working waterfront, this includes looking at the design and engineering for what the working waterfront infrastructure needs to be resilient. This is going to be incremental adaptation as we see changes in sea level rise, storm surge, and flooding. So that's super important, giving a sort of a prescription for what those working waterfront parcel owners can see as changes confronting them in the future. And just an example of one of the other grants was to the Southern Maine Regional Planning and Development Council. And they are developing model town stormwater ordinance. And as you heard from from Susie Arnold, increased stormwater both in quality and quantity affects shellfish growing areas. So that's a connection there. Many other local and regional projects, some of which have been mentioned today already. So if the committee wants more information on that, I could provide it at a later time. The second area of activity for the coastal program has been discussed already in terms of reducing our climate footprint using natural carbon storage. So you heard the term blue carbon as relates to Maine salt marshes, seaweeds, eelgrass, and the like. Commissioner Loisem talked about our our blue carbon network, and that at the regional level, it's led by EPA. I think the committee might know this already, but we have one of the leading experts in blue carbon living and teaching in Maine, and that's Bev Johnson from Bates College. So critically important, and the role of this group is really to, as the commissioner talked about, improve the inventory. We really want to advance the research that's happening here in Maine, and also the pilot projects like Susie mentioned with aquaculture. Next slide, please. The third map to the Climate Council goals is understanding climate impacts on marine habitats. You're going to hear more from about the science of that from Carl Wilson. But we run a what's called the Maine Coast Mapping Initiative, where a lobster boat has been outfitted with a lot of equipment to, after the analysis, produces some very detailed maps of bathymetry and seafloor bottom, seafloor habitats. So we, over time, and this is going to be a long-term effort, is to track those species assemblages. Are they where they used to be? Where are they now? What does that habitat look like? Next bullet is was also alluded to, or not directly mentioned previously, was the salt marsh analysis. So coastal program with partners has a network of elevation tables distributed. We'd like to increase the distribution of those stations, and we're measuring the ability of marshes to keep up with sea level rise as they need to build sediment to keep up. And my fourth and last point is mapped to the Climate Council report again, is how we can use natural systems to restore and improve coastal habitats. These coastal habitats, if they are providing a full range of ecosystem services, can really do this work for us. And by ecosystem services, I mean fish habitat, reduction of flooding, storage of floodwaters, public safety from flooding, sort of a multi-objective approach when we use natural systems. So first bullet, very talented staff of ours has developed what we're calling Coastwise. It's a municipal technical assistance program for towns and other road owners that focuses specifically on tidal flow, the areas where there are culverts and other restrictions that impede full tidal flow. So that's going to be released soon, and a variety of partners and coastal program staff are going to be going out and talking to communities about how to use that information. And then lastly, living shorelines are another way to mimic nature, where we're using natural materials to slow erosion over time. And that's important to marine resources, because that sand supply from eroding bluffs in particular, it is what forms our sand flats, our mud flats, and what drives our shellfish economy is healthy those healthy systems. So we've completed 3 pilot projects in Casco Bay that demonstrate different techniques like bagged oyster shells, fallen trees. So beginning to look at through pilots how we can address these issues. And I think that does it for me. Deirdre, you want to move to the next slide? That's Carl. Thank you very much, folks. And I look forward to speaking with you further if you have any questions.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Carl Wilson. I direct our Bureau of Marine Science, and I just want to say that our Bureau is here to conduct, support, and collaborate on top flight research. And really the point of our existence is to provide policymakers the information to help make informed decisions for marine resources and our communities along the coast of Maine. And so this group and our policy group within the department and the fishermen along the coast of Maine are our constituents that we are serving. And so happy to be here and happy to talk a little bit about some of the great work that we're doing relative to climate change. And truly, these are amazing times to be living in, and things are changing rapidly, as we heard earlier. And I'm hoping that our work is able to adapt and support these changing times as well. Last year, 2021, one of a big kind of unexpected but really important initiative that we helped support was helping to cite and provide guidance on siting locations that might minimize impact on marine resources and fisheries relative to the governor's application for the research array for offshore wind. Our group also published several different articles in scientific and peer-reviewed journals on lobster maturity and changes in how reference points, what we're calling ecologically based reference points, can be used for menhaden. Our landings group had over 1,300 requests for information from researchers, the public, and press. Almost half of these were served by an online portal that was developed by the department internally. So people can kind of self-serve and collect the information that's needed, but there was also nearly 750 direct requests that were fielded by our staff, and just points to the level of interest that's out there for what's going on for fisheries in Maine. Our landings group also developed a harvester smartphone application that will allow harvesters to input their daily catch, and this is really in anticipation of moving the lobster fishery to 100% reporting in coming years. We maintained our environmental monitoring sensors in Booth Bay Harbor. This is the longest time series of temperature in the Gulf of Maine. And recently we added instrumentation that allowed us to track ocean pH, dissolved oxygen, and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in Booth Bay Harbor. And kind of interesting, last year was the first year we had acoustic receivers, and we detected along our shoreline 27 individual white sharks that were tagged with acoustic tags in Massachusetts and neighboring states. There was no tagging activity in Maine, so these are all sharks that were tagged in other areas of the coast, New Hampshire as well, Massachusetts and Nova Scotia, and detected along our shores, so pretty interesting. Next slide, please. Our group also seeks and has received competitive funding for work with our trawl survey and lobsters, and we collaborate on several different lobster projects, including social indicators, a management strategy evaluation, and assessment model parameter updates. This is all in the realm of adapting what we're doing and updating the work that we conduct. We've conducted and collaborated on scallop surveys, somatic measurements, and so that's how much scallops are actually investing in reproduction and tagging. We conducted the 2021 Northern Gulf of Maine scallop survey. So this is a survey in federal waters and is really one of the real bright spots areas for federal fisheries in Maine. And then our protected resources group is continuing to document the shifts in distribution patterns for the North Atlantic right whale. And so we've got a series of acoustic monitoring stations, as well as a very active gear technology work and looking at innovations that can help guide and provide guidance for the lobster fishery moving forward. Next slide, please. And finally, and I know we don't have much time to talk today, but we're really looking forward to what 2022 looks like. We've created a new division, partially with the support of this committee. It's a new old division, and that when I started 20 years ago, we did have an ecology division, but we've recreated that as the Division of Ecology and Environment. There's going to be an emphasis on studies to support the department's work on North Atlantic right whale and the lobster fishery. And then this new division will also be initiating pre-construction monitoring for the proposed research array. So this will be looking at fisheries, the marine resources, and the physical environment around the research array, and broadly supporting our understanding around offshore wind development throughout the state. We'll be implementing a shark monitoring network along the coast of Maine, and we'll actually have a real-time acoustic receiver that people will be able to track any tagged sharks that might come by that receiver on a real-time basis. And then finally, probably the most relevant to our discussion around climate change right now is we want to conduct a review of our monitoring programs with respect to climate change. So we want to evaluate the ability of our current programs to detect climate-related changes. And so this looks at the frequency and intensity of sampling and the data elements that we're actually collecting as we go out into the water. And then we want to kind of, with that evaluation, we want to propose changes for the existing programs and suggest additional programs as deemed necessary. And just to, very quickly, just to end on it, as an example, our our sea urchin dive survey was initiated back in the early 2000s as a coast-wide dive survey that was evaluating the sea urchin populations. And over time, and as that fishery and the resource has shifted, we've contracted that survey. Now, however, that survey is one of the few opportunities where you actually have human eyeballs on the bottom recording consistent data on a variety of species in addition to sea urchins. And so we've tracked invasive species and the rise and fall of different crustaceans and other invertebrates with that survey. It was originally tied to the sea urchin fishery. Through this kind of climate review, we might be able to recommend or suggest, if we want to use that survey to track kind of climatic changes, then we might need to reinitiate that survey as a coast-wide survey, where currently it's just kind of contracted down with the fishery and follow that resource. So that is it. Thank you very much, and look forward to the conversation later on.
Great. Thank you, Carl. Great presentation. And we'll roll right into Cole's presentation from the Bureau of Public Health.
Good morning, Representative McCreight and Senator Miramont and the rest of the members of the Marine Resources Committee. My name is Cole Canwit, and I am the Director of the Bureau of Public Health. And I just wanted to update you quickly on the climate change initiatives we have going on in our Bureau. I was a member of the subcommittee with the longest title possible for the climate change group, and there's a lot of good work done there. We are addressing in the Bureau of Public Health 2 specific areas related to bivalve shellfish. So that's the focus of our work, is related to bivalve shellfish. So anything with 2 shells, clams, oysters, mussels. We're focused on public health issues and resource management issues. So the public health issues are basically related to the occurrence, distribution, and abundance of harmful algal blooms. So many of you have heard me talk about those before. They're basically naturally occurring phytoplankton that can cause toxicity, and then the shellfish eat them and can potentially cause illness in humans. We're also looking at increased presence of Vibrio bacteria. Again, this is a naturally occurring bacteria, but with warmer waters and warmer air temperatures, the risk is increasing for Vibrio-related illnesses in people who consume especially raw bivalve shellfish. We're also looking at the increased incidence of extreme weather events. There's not a lot we can do about that, but we have to respond to it. We are seeing more and more intense rain events over 24 hours, and we have various closure criteria that we have to react to, say when it rains an inch or 2 inches in 24 hours. With resource management, we're looking at changes in species presence and abundance. So some previous speakers talked about more quahogs or hard clams being present in areas that historically, since about the 50s, they haven't really been around in those types of numbers. Even some fisheries and towns have shifted to hard clam harvesting more than soft shell clam harvesting. Also, recruitment and survivability is changing. We're looking at the impacts of increased predation by both native and non-native species. You also heard people talking about green crabs, and I think you'll hear more about that later. Climate change or warming waters really enhances green crab populations, and so bivalve shellfish species that are prone to predation by green crabs can decline pretty quickly. We're also looking at the effects of acidification, low dissolved oxygen in the water, and other environmental impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. So what we're doing to address some of these areas of concern with public health, we're increasing the harmful algal bloom monitoring program. We're also developing new testing methods for toxicity within shellfish with new instrumentation that is hopefully going to be provided by ARPA funds. Our initial proposal was accepted, but we're still in the process of receiving or applying for those funds. We are initiating a Vibrio monitoring program, which we've not had in the past. This will help us identify high-risk areas and develop mitigation management. We do have specific Vibrio control regulations, but we don't have a great idea on the distribution of Vibrio along the Maine coast. So this will help us identify those areas. Again, this is going to be possible with new instrumentation for our laboratory based on ARPA funds. And with resource management, we are initiating intertidal sentinel monitoring sites, and this will allow us to assess long-term changes. This would be sort of a comprehensive assessment strategy or monitoring strategy. We would be looking for everything: presence and abundance of native and non-native species, habitat shifts, and environmental parameters such as pH and DO. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Cole. And we're gonna just continue on with the update now and move into the working waterfront area. And Deidre Gilbert, the Director of State Marine Policy, is gonna cover that.
Sorry, Pat, you skipped over Sean. He has a couple.
Where is Sean?
Pat, you're hurting my feelings.
Well, I may have been intentional there, Sean. I'm just trying to harden you up a little bit. I didn't see you on the screen, Sean. My apologies.
Here with a new bureau on the block, so.
Yeah. With that, great introduction, very personal introduction. Without further ado, Sean Ledwin, the Bureau of Sea Run Fisheries, the new Bureau, the new again Bureau, Bureau of Sea Run
Yes. Thank you, Pat, and thank you to the committee for having me. I'm getting the hint, so I guess I'll try to make this short and sweet. So my name's Sean Ledwin. I'm the director of the Bureau of Sea Run Fisheries and Habitat. Our Bureau manages, monitors, and restores 13 sea run species, which are species that use both rivers and ocean habitats, as you guys are well aware. Sea run species are impacted by climate change now and will be even more so in the future. For example, stream flows are changing, meaning lower and warmer lower river flows and warmer temperatures, and also more flooding. Warmer temperatures in the streams are impacting cold water species such as Atlantic salmon and smelt. As you guys learned about earlier, there's a lot of changes in the marine environment, which affects the marine survival of a lot of our species. For example, we often say Atlantic salmon get kind of lost at sea due to the poor marine survival due to all these changing conditions. And also sea levels are rising, and we're seeing a lot of impacts of that even now with saltwater intrusion into some of our productive coastal areas for alewife producing lakes and ponds, for example. Next slide. So what are we doing to address some of these impacts? We're working with partners to upgrade infrastructure such as road crossings to improve connectivity for fish and also resilience for flooding and scour as more frequent flooding events are predicted to occur. We're restoring impaired habitat, such as removing obsolete dams that warm water and prevent fish from moving upstream to more optimal, cooler habitats. We're working to identify and protect important climate resilient habitats. And we're managing for resilience, which means we're trying to increase the numbers of fish, the runs, the available habitats. So our sort of portfolio of fish life histories and areas is diverse. So fish runs can kind of repopulate runs that fall down and those types of things. We're also monitoring changes in run timing, species distribution, and abundances, and adapting our management with new information. For example, given warming river temperatures, we're studying the impacts of fish that are delayed below hydropower dams during their migrations, and using that information to make recommendations for improving fish passage at hydro facilities. Next slide. So this is just a few pictures of touches on a sort of a bunch of different types of things I just talked about. So on your far left, that's sort of a well-designed fishway at a road crossing that also provides flood resilience. On your lower left, those are smelt camps, which we do monitoring with, and there's changes in smelt runs due to climate change, but also the use of smelt and the ability to get out on the rivers with changing ice and those types of things. River flows are changing, and the timing is changing. And so on your top right is an example of some climate predictive work we've done on the St. Croix River. If there's really low flows at certain times of year, those can impact sea run fish, but can also have a lot of other impacts to other uses. And then on your bottom right, it's just a quote about sort of the changing environment and the impacts to Atlantic salmon, which is a iconic Maine species. And, we have the last remaining wild population in the US here in Maine. And so we're just anticipating more changes and impacts to species like those in the future. So that's all I have. I appreciate the time, and I think Deirdre's up next.
I am, I think. Thank you, Sean. Good morning, Representative McCreight, Senator Miramont, members of the committee. I am batting cleanup with just one slide on the Working Waterfront program. As Hannah had mentioned earlier, and I'm sure you are all well aware, there was another $40 million in general fund money made available to the LMF program. And a minimum of 10% of that is to be made available for working waterfront projects, so $4 million. This program began in about 2006, and we are approaching 30 properties that have been encumbered through this program with a working waterfront covenant. I think it's important for folks to understand what the state is doing or what LMF is doing through this program, which is we are purchasing the development rights on a property to ensure that the property could never be developed in a way that would be inconsistent with its use for commercial fishing. So that's the primary objective of the program. And our objective is to secure, frankly, as many properties as we can in that manner from willing sellers. Obviously, these are all coastal properties that are subject to sea level rise. That has not been a criteria that we have used to evaluate proposed projects historically. Starting with the last round, we did do some projections for the properties that were applying and presented that information to the review panel and to the LMF board. But because this is not a grant, it is actually the purchasing of the development rights. The department doesn't have any ability to enforce how the funds that somebody receives through this program are used. So in this current round, what we are proposing to do with regard to this topic is expand how we have thought about one of the scoring criteria, which is the utility of the property, and ask a prospective applicant to explain basically what their thoughts or plans for their property are with regard to sea level rise. We're going to provide some resources for them to be able to do that. And we do provide support in project development if folks have questions about what that means. But really what we're just trying to do is give them the information that they need, because if they're going to receive funds through this program and they're going to take those funds and put them into their wharf, we want them to have all the information that they would need to make good decisions that will improve the utility of that property for as long as possible. So that is the extent to which those issues kind of play into this specific program. And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have, but that is all we have in terms of slides for this morning.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Do we have questions for Commissioner, any of the presenters? It's a lot of information. Much appreciated.
And Representative McCray, as the committee kind of absorbs what we said, obviously we'll be very happy to give specific presentations on any items that you want more detail on. And I do know we've got ASMFC and Right Whales coming up soon. So,
right, yeah, we'll see you again, right?
You'll, like always, you'll get sick of us before it's all over.
Not yet. Representative Bloom.
I just have a thank you. I'm just blown away by all of this wonderful work that our scientists and our department are doing. It's truly impressive. My question is just, you talked about the white sharks that you're not tagging in Maine, but you plan to expand that network of monitoring. Do you plan to start tagging as well?
Representative Bloom, we have done some preliminary work with a few fishermen to see if we can locate and fish for, catch, and then tag some white sharks. The problem becomes the proximity to beaches, and we don't want to be obviously attracting sharks into those areas. So staff are working to find kind of a time of year situation where we might be able to do that without then creating a potential for interaction. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there. I've not gotten an update in a while, but I'll talk with Aaron Summer. Although Carl may be still on, he may have a little bit more of an update if he's still on. But if not, I'll get an update from Carl and make sure I bring that back to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? As the commissioner said, we will have further updates once the ASMFC meeting happens in a couple weeks, and also on whales, which is something on everybody's mind for sure. Linda.
I just brought Carl back into the meeting. He should be coming in shortly if somebody do have questions for him.
Thank you. Representative Bloom, I assume he heard you, but just in case he didn't, do you want to repeat what you said? what you
Yes.
asked.
Hi, Carl. Do you plan to do, does Maine plan to do their own tagging of white sharks, or are we just going to be monitoring?
Well, I think as Pat, I thought Pat actually gave a great answer, and I wasn't planning to expand on too much more of what he said. With really amazing that 27 sharks showed up along our shores. Those are unique individual sharks. They were all tagged in other areas. And so it gives you an idea of some of the kind of the regional connection that exists along the coast of Maine. But to your question, it doesn't actually talk about sharks that might be resident in the area or spending, more time along the coast. And so, yes, we've started out some preliminary work to go through some of the techniques, and we're in the process of hiring a shark scientist to the staff as it is right now. So that increased capacity is going to really allow us to address this in the future. So good question.
Thank you. I just have one more follow-up. Is there any, regards to tagging, is there any improvement in the technology to tag right whales?
Not that I understand, or not that I know of. It's the question that always comes up. But from what I've been told is that right whales in particular, when the darts or the attachment points for the tags tend to actually cause the whales more harm than the actual information that's getting. So you've got to be really careful when you tag those animals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, I don't expect you to answer this now, but I'm glad to hear that you were able to recreate those bureaus we heard about. And just for the committee going forward this year, as always, I hope you'll let us know what is needed so that we can, as a committee, make decisions. And I don't know if you know this, but will there be any budget items, do you think, related to marine resources in an upcoming budget?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. The governor's not finalized her supplemental budget yet. As you know, there's a lot of conversations because of the surplus, the amount of surplus there is. She's obviously being very cautious in that approach as well, not knowing kind of what the future might bring with COVID and other issues. So we have presented her with some changes that we would like to see in the supplemental. She's been very supportive to date, but no final decisions have been made. So as soon as they have been made, we'll make sure you and the senator know, and we can present those to the committee.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep.
Anything else before we move on to our next presenters? Seeing no hands, I welcome Brian Ambrett, if I'm saying that correctly, and Sarah Curran from the Community Resilience Partnership, talking about the programs that they are doing and any overlaps with community and marine issues. Welcome.
Great. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, Brian's going to go ahead and share our slides for our presentation this morning. So Senator Miramont, Representative McCrate, members of the Committee on Marine Resources, thank you for having us this morning. My name is Sarah Curran, and this is my colleague, Brian Ambrett. We're with the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, and we appreciate the invitation to speak with you today about the new Community Resilience Partnership. Next slide, please, Brian. So as you heard from Director Pingree and Commissioner Loisem, Maine Won't Wait, the Climate Action Plan calls for robust technical assistance and funding to communities to support local and regional climate resilience initiatives. The Community Resilience Partnership is established to provide grants and technical assistance to assist communities in Maine to reduce carbon emissions, to transition to clean energy, and to become more resilient to climate change impacts such as extreme weather, flooding, sea level rise, public health impacts, and more. The development of the Community Resilience Partnership was informed by a community resilience pilot project that has been in progress since spring of last year. The pilot was funded by philanthropy with a purpose to advance climate resilience planning and implementation and to demonstrate replicable community engagement models. The pilot project provided funding to 3 regional service providers to work with cohorts of 2 to 3 communities in diverse regions across the state. Each cohort met in a series of workshops to understand their specific climate vulnerabilities and to develop a list of high priority action items. And then the examples are listed here. The 3 projects that we funded are the Northern Maine Development Commission and the Nature Conservancy worked with the towns of Caribou, Fort Fairfield, and Washburn. The Greater Portland Council of Governments worked with Bridgeton and Wyndham, and the New England Environmental Finance Center and the Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, both at USM, worked with the coastal towns of Harpswell, Phippsburg, and West Bath. The pilot provided funding for implementation of the priorities that were identified through the community workshops. Each of the 3 cohorts decided to pool their implementation funding and pursue cooperative projects to advance a regional climate resilience priority. So in Northern Maine, those towns will undertake a program to identify climate hardy tree species and plant them in locations as windbreaks to prevent dangerous snow drifting across roadways in snowstorms. The Lakes region's towns are going to be developing standards and procedures to be written into municipal plans and ordinances to look at long-term climate adaptation. And the coastal towns are going to be working with an engineering consultant to develop sea level rise adaptation options for a public boat landing or wharf in each of the towns. Next slide, please. So in addition to supporting these towns and regions, the pilot also provided us with valuable information about community engagement strategies around climate and also program design when we think about how to support towns and communities across the state in navigating climate change. So all of that information helped to inform the launch of the new statewide Community Resilience Partnership that was launched on December 1st at the Climate Council meeting in Orono. The partnership was developed with input from communities, from support organizations, and in coordination with our state agency partners. It expands upon the Community Resilience Pilot Project, and it includes both climate resilience and clean energy and emissions reductions. It's a really exciting new program that provides support to Maine communities, both inland and coastal, to take concrete steps to increase their resilience to climate impacts like sea level rise and extreme weather, as well as to reduce their emissions and save money by investing in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I'm going to turn it over now to Brian, and he's going to talk about the details of the new Climate Resilience Partnership.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to talk to you about this exciting new program today. As Sarah mentioned, the Community Resilience Partnership was launched last month, and we currently have 3 different funding opportunities open. So I'm going to describe to you how those 3 all fit together and advance local climate projects and the state's adaptation goals that Director Pingree and Commissioner Loisem spoke of earlier. The partnership is funded with $4.75 million over the next 2 years from the biennial budget and provides support for municipal, tribal, and regional projects that reduce emissions and prepare communities for the impacts of climate change. As I said, there are 3 types of funding associated with the partnership. First, there are grants directly to communities for planning and implementation of projects. There are grants to service provider organizations to help small and large communities get started. And then there are contracts to regional coordinators who will support communities with the implementation and in securing additional funding. The partnership will provide grants directly to communities and tribes for planning and action with the goal of helping these communities to get ready for larger federal and state funding opportunities in the future. The partnership will also build capacity by making grants to service providers who will support communities in the planning, funding, and implementation of their priorities. This slide describes how communities join and participate in the partnership. It's complex looking, so we'll break it down over the next couple of slides. The top half here of the diagram illustrates the steps communities will take to commit to joining the partnership, assess their starting point, engage their residents in setting priorities, and enrolling in the partnership. This pre-work is important in building the foundation and the community support for clean energy and resilience projects. And some communities have done much of this work already and will be ready to join the partnership and apply for grants. Other communities will need help with this planning, prioritization, and support building. So we have grants for service providers to assist communities in the foundational steps. And I'll talk more about the service provider grants in just a few moments. Looking at the bottom half of the diagram, once a community has joined the partnership, they're eligible to apply for community action grants that will fund implementation of the projects that they prioritize in their pre-work. Communities will apply year after year for these grants, so long as they maintain an active status in the program by assessing their progress and updating their priorities every 2 years. So let's take a closer look at the 3 different grant programs. Community action grants are grants directly to municipalities and tribes for projects that reduce energy use and costs or make their community more resilient to the impacts of climate change, like flooding, extreme weather, drought, and public health impacts. We expect these grants to lead to emissions reductions or to resilience to the negative impacts of climate change. And because that $4.75 million is sourced from the state budget, it may be used as match for federal grants. And so we expect these funds to be used to leverage other state funds and other federal funds for larger projects when that's appropriate. There are 2 ways that communities can choose to apply for these action grants. The first is to choose projects from a list of 72 activities that align with the state's climate action plan and require no matching dollars from the community. These activities are organized by the same 8 broad strategies in the state plan and include projects like wetland conservation, living shorelines for erosion control, assessing and improving working waterfront infrastructure, and protecting coastal water quality and public health. We heard from many communities that they wanted guidance on how to get started in their climate action. So this list is a collection of activities that are community level equivalents of the activities in the state's climate action plan. Where we can, we provide linkages to state programs and resources that can help with each of these projects. The second flavor of action grants is for community or for projects that are not on this list of 72 actions, but have been identified by the community as a priority for clean energy, emissions reductions, or building community resilience. Applications for these projects will require matching funds, but an in-kind match is allowed from the community. In both options, communities may request up to $50,000 for individual projects and up to $100,000 for collaborative projects with neighboring communities, as we saw in the pilot project. We do need to ensure that the benefits from this grant program and the projects it support are shared across the diverse people of Maine in each community. To that end, strong proposals will include descriptions of robust community engagement when appropriate, especially to those who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And proposals should consider how the outcomes and the benefits of those projects will be distributed equitably. Returning for a moment to our diagram, we have covered the grants to communities. Now let's back up a step and talk about grants to organizations that help communities get started in the partnership. We know that many communities in the state, especially smaller ones, may need to call on outside expertise and capacity to assess their needs and set priorities. And for this, we have the service provider grants. Service provider grants are available to service provider organizations who will recruit 2 to 5 communities to join the partnership and will help them conduct robust community engagement that sets priorities and help them apply for community action grants or other funding opportunities to implement their priorities. These organizations may be regional planning organizations, councils of government, county governments, nonprofits, universities, extension, and consultants. The outcomes we are looking to support are new enrollments in the partnership by the 2 to 5 communities in each group, a list of priority activities from each of the communities, and a list of potential collaborative projects that those communities might want to work on collaboratively, and assistance to the communities in applying for action grants or other funding sources. Applicants for the service provider grants can request up to $10,000 per community in the group. So that would work out to somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000, depending on how large the group is. And we learned from this pilot project that these service provider organizations had to invest extra resources to work with some of the smaller communities in the state. So an additional $2,500 may be requested for each community with a population below 4,000 and for communities with higher social vulnerability. In order to ensure a fair regional distribution of grant funds, GoPIF intends to make at least one award, and hopefully more than that, in each of the 5 regions listed on the slide here. Back to our diagram, we have covered how communities can join the partnership, how they can get assistance from service providers for that pre-work, and how they can get action grants for implementing energy and resilience projects. The final category of grants is to build capacity around the state to make sure that communities can continue their work for years to come and build up to more complex and impactful projects. So lastly, we'll turn to the regional coordinators. This third funding opportunity is a new pilot intended to complement the action grants and the service provider grants, with a focus on supporting communities and their service providers to fund and implement priority climate and energy projects. Eligibility for this is similar to the service provider grants. The regional coordinators are intended to support 12 to 15 communities to secure additional funding and other resources to implement their high priority emissions reductions and resilience projects, and to demonstrate innovative and replicable models for building regional technical assistance around the state. Unlike the recurring action and service provider grants, this is a one-time pilot with 2 years worth of funding, funded by a combination of private philanthropy and federal dollars. Applicants may request up to $100,000 per year for the 2 years. The pilot seeks to have one coordinator in each of the 4 regions listed here, again with a focus on supporting implementation projects and helping communities secure larger sources of state and federal funding. With all 3 of these grant programs, we have staggered the deadlines for applications. The community action grant deadlines are twice a year in March and September. Service provider grant deadlines are also twice a year, February and August. And the one-time regional coordinators pilot has a deadline in a few short weeks at the end of this month. The Community Resilience Partnerships website is listed here. It provides information about the 3 grants and contains all of the materials that will support a community in enrolling in the partnership. We also have links to informational webinar recordings that provide greater detail on each of the 3 grants and on the partnership as a whole. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah to finish the presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian. There's one related program that we wanted to mention briefly. The Department of Transportation is developing an infrastructure adaptation fund, and that program will administer $20 million from the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. This is another strategy that was highlighted in Maine Won't Wait, supporting the adaptation of infrastructure to the impacts of climate change. So this fund will support infrastructure improvement projects that address climate vulnerabilities, that consider future climate projections and infrastructure design, and increase public safety. And this fund will be launched by DOT in the coming months. So we just wanted to mention that one as well. And then finally, we just wanted to say thank you. We really appreciate the invitation to come and talk with you about the new partnership today. We look forward to working with you to support climate resilience and clean energy priorities in coastal communities. I'm happy to take questions now, or we're happy to follow up as well. We do encourage you to visit the partnership website for more information. And absolutely, would you please share the information with the communities in your districts? We're really excited about the opportunity to support communities and provide funding for projects in communities across the state. So would appreciate your help in getting the word out. Thank you very much. And I'll stop there.
Thank you both. I can tell you how excited Harpswell and West Bath are with the work that the SIS allowed them to be doing, and Phippsburg. And you answered, Brian, you answered my question about how do people know and get through the process. That chart is very helpful. So thank you. Representative Bloom.
Thank you. And thank you, Brian and Sarah. That presentation has been updated and it's really good. And I really understand it a lot better than I did. And I wanted to know a couple of things. One, how did you come up with that region 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess 5? And 2, how does this interact, or is it completely separate from the Coastwise toolbox that Kathleen Leiden was talking about?
Thanks, Representative Bloom. Those are great questions. I'll take the second and let Brian answer about the regions. We worked really hard to collaborate with our state agency partners as we developed this program. This is a brand new program with funding from the legislature just last year. So we worked with Kathleen and others on designing the program, and we've paid a lot of attention to how it interacts with other resources, including both technical assistance and grant programs that the state provides. And so we will continue to do that. One of the things that we're doing is trying to find opportunities where this funding can leverage federal funding, looking for places where a project might be more appropriate for an existing state program that might be able to offer additional or increased funds. And so we will continue to work with those state agency partners as applications come in to sort of try and figure out what the best fit is to get the maximum benefit for the communities. So that's been really, really important to us, is to work collaboratively with our state agency partners on how this new program fits with the coastal program and with the technical assistance provided by municipal planning over in DACF and with the programs at DEP. And we've been really thrilled with the support that we've had from our state partner agencies. Kathleen, do you, Representative McCreight, Kathleen Leiden may also be able to chime in on the specific connections to the Coastwise program if you'd like her to.
Sure, thank you. Kathleen?
Yes, thank Representative McCreight. I would just say that I think the use of the Coastwise BMPs and that tool will be added to the resource materials that GOPIP is going to put out for communities. And then I believe it can be considered also one of those other eligible activities. Is that correct, Sarah? Okay.
Great, thank you.
I have a follow-up, if I may.
Sure.
So you said that the Coastwise Toolbox has not been published yet. Is that correct, Kathleen?
That's correct. It's almost there. Almost there.
Great, thank you.
And then your question about the regions, Brian.
Right, yeah, that it's a good question, Representative Bloom, and it turns out that it's actually a really hard thing to do, is to chop the state up into regions. We knew that we were going to have funding for 4 regional coordinators, and we wanted to give them areas that were roughly equal in numbers of towns, and so we divided the state just sort of along county lines and tried to get sort of a representative number of towns and counties into each of the regions. We thought about having more coordinators and more regions, or fewer coordinators and fewer regions, and 4 just seemed to be a number that worked with the funding that we had and the ability to divide the state up sort of along county lines.
Along county lines, meaning, so you didn't look at like watershed districts or any kind of geographical, well, they are geographical, they're geographically contiguous regions, right? Each region are contiguous, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's always been my thought too, is like, how do you do that in Maine? And so it seems like you've got sort of like a coastal region. I'd have to look at the regions on a map to figure out exactly what it means, but you think it makes sense. Does it cut towns? It doesn't cut towns in 2, does it?
No, it doesn't cut towns in 2. It doesn't cut any counties in 2. There are 2 of the regions will have coastline and 2 will be entirely inland, but all of the regions will have some inland landlocked towns. So it's going to be a mix of both.
And is it related to any regional planning organizations?
We did try to draw it so that there were not too many instances where regional planning organization footprints crossed our regional lines, but we weren't able to accommodate that in every case. So there may be some small areas of overlap where it doesn't quite line up, but in most instances, a regional planning organization should fall entirely within a region in most instances.
My last question, if I may. So these regions, you mentioned that you're hiring 4 people that are going to be in those. You said there were 4 people coming in, or what was that about? I missed that.
Yes, so those 4 regional coordinators, which will be one in each of those 4 regions, we're looking to contract with organizations on the ground to host those 4 coordinators. So those the regions on the ground will be the ones doing the hiring. They will be receiving the up to $100,000 annually for 2 years to hire that position.
May have some more questions at another time about that. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you both. That's very exciting and helpful. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're not late, really. So press ahead, people, or do people want to take a quick break? We have 2 more presentations, Lydia and a little bit on green crabs. Keep going.
I will be brief.
Let's keep going. We're losing committee members anyway, so let's keep going so we don't lose anybody else. Our own Lydia Bloom, who has been a champion on these issues, serves on the Climate Council, make sure that we have up-to-date information through the Climate Caucus, Coastal Caucus, and did a kind of interesting trip recently. So Lydia, take it away.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I had a desire because of all the work that we had done on the Climate Council and this wonderful report, and that I would really like to go to the COP26 international meeting of the parties in Glasgow. And so I went November 4th and I left on November 11th. I thought I was going to be there with the governor and with some other people from GoPIF, and that they did not go because of COVID. So I ended up being the only person there from Maine. And I went because I was so excited to share the progress that Maine has made in such a short period of time on this subject. I thought it was a hopeful message, and I thought it was important to spread that, to give other subnational groups hope. And that's what I found out there too, was that there was a lot of focus on subnational groups such as states who are actually who are a lot more nimble than some of the federal governments and are really leading the way. And I found that, and it's really illustrated by what we just saw this morning, the depth and the breadth of our scientific community, our incredible people at DMR and at GoPIF. We are really blessed with incredible scientists and work that they have done. So it was quite the experience being there. Had to be tested every single day. We were in this. Everyone had to wear a mask all the time. It was this very huge space where it was kind of like the most developed, shall we say, developed trade show you've ever been to, with these large, what they call pavilions, and almost every country in the world was there, from Pakistan to Saudi Arabia to Sweden to the United States, had like 3 different pavilions. And I really, I wasn't involved in any of the decision making. Of course, I was, but I was in the exclusive blue zone. So I was able to participate in some panels about the subnational work that Maine is doing. Very proud to represent the state and talk about all the good work that we're doing, and really found that people know about Maine. And, we have the opportunity to be a real leader and with the successes so far, and hopefully the future successes that we have with this climate work that we're doing. I also brought my daughter with me because I thought it was really important. She's 21, senior in college at the time, and I wanted her to be there. And she couldn't be in the blue zone with me. But she went to there were some major demonstrations that she was a part of. And it was just really good to spend time in getting her perspective, because there were so many young people there. And they were mostly outside of the venue, and all the decision making is being made by all these older people. And I was really struck by talking to my daughter and realizing how important our young people are to this effort, how they're the ones, that one slide that we just saw, how they're the ones who are going to be experiencing the real damaging effects of climate change. And we really need to act before 2030 and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Instead of increasing it, we have to make it go the other way. And I came back with a renewed sense of the most important people are our young people right now. We need to engage them. We need to give them hope that we are listening, that we here at the legislature in Maine are actually listening and doing the work. But we need them. We need their enthusiasm and their youth and their energy, for God's sakes, because this is going to take a lot of energy to really come up with solutions. And I'm so talking about mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, but also talking about the resilience aspect that is so that we have no choice but to pursue, because no matter even if we do reduce our emissions and we stop warming from 1.5 degrees, we still are going to have effects. We still are going to have sea level rise that we can't stop, but we certainly can make it. We can maybe slow it down. And so I think in Maine, we're doing a great job. As I said, I was really proud of it to be there and doing that and representing them. I was only there for 8 days. Glasgow was a great little city. The whole city was basically closed down, and it was all about COP26. You went on the subway, you went anywhere, there were posters and signs and messages, and everyone was behind this big event that took over this city. So I was really proud to be there. And it really, opened my eyes and made me more resolved to come back and to help Maine continue to be a leader. Because if we can do it, we can really show, we can show other states and other people what we're doing, and how successful we can do. And that only gives people hope, which we really need. Because boy, you look at some of what we've just seen today, it can be very depressing. And I want to know that we can do something about it. And I'm going to try really hard to do that in my last year here at the legislature. So if you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Lydia. That's exciting. Did you have any haggis?
I did. I had haggis and nips and tatties, or naps and tatties, or something like that. Anyway, it was really good. Turnips and mashed potatoes. Yeah. And wonderful. You could hardly understand the Scots. You had to really listen, but so charming, so wonderful. And again, I was so happy to be there with my daughter. It was a great mother-daughter experience. And I think it really influenced her too. And we both had different experiences, and we were able to share that information. And as I said, I've come back more resolved than ever to help our youth understand what we're doing and to engage them in the clean energy economy that they can be a part of and help to reach our goals.
Well, that's a very hopeful place to be.
It is.
Any comments, questions for our colleague. Thanks for representing Maine.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very proud to do it.
So our last presentation, Representative Hepler, are you behind that picture? I wondered if you'd like to introduce our next speaker. Not sure if she's there. So I'd like to introduce Eve Fisher, who is, I believe, a student of Representative Hepler. And we've invited her here to talk about some of her work regarding green crabs in Maine. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello. I'll just share my slides and get started.
Okay. Do you want to say anything, Representative Hepler, before Eve gets started?
No, other than to say, I'm glad Eve is here. She's done some really important work. I have not worked directly with her. My colleagues have, so I'm going to let, but I'm not taking credit for any hard work she's done.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Eve.
All right.
When you're ready.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eve Fisher. I'm the University of Maine Farmington 2021 Policy Scholar, and my research topic has been evaluating policy solutions for a green crab market in Maine. Green crabs pose a really unique and challenging problem to our state, but they also have great potential as an untapped marine resource. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share my research with you, and I thank you all for your time. So green crabs, they're one of the most invasive species in the world, and many of their characteristics make them especially invasive. They reproduce extremely quickly, laying 185,000 eggs at a time, about twice a year. And the larvae of green crabs are very easily spread by currents. So once they enter an area, they spread through it very quickly and infest that ecosystem. They can also tolerate a wide range of salinities and temperatures, which make them very resistant to climate change. And as was mentioned earlier today, they're actually helped by climate change and reproduce faster under warmer conditions. So all of these characteristics together make them spread and take over new ecosystems very easily. And once they're embedded in a place, green crabs cause ecological and economic harm in multiple ways. They destroy delicate and vital eelgrass habitats that we've also talked about today, which are a necessary nursery for many marine species. They burrow into the mud around eelgrass, like in this photo here, and dig up the eelgrass shoots. They also outcompete native crab species for resources. In my participation in some green crab monitoring surveys with the nonprofit Manomet this summer, I counted hundreds and hundreds of green crabs, but only less than 10 native rock or Jonah crabs the whole summer. They're extremely aggressive predators, especially towards soft shell clams and even juvenile lobsters. The greatest economic impact of green crabs is definitely the soft shell clam decline. As shown by the gray bars on this graph from the Down East Institute, clam landings have been steadily declining since the 1970s. And it's been determined that the #1 cause of this decline is predation by green crabs. Clamming being one of Maine's most valuable industries means that green crabs have a major threat to Maine's economy overall and our working waterfront. Netting and fencing are two of the strategies that clam harvesters have to lessen green crab impacts on their clam flats. Netting in the picture on the left involves protecting the flats with wide nets and can be an effective way at keeping green crabs from preying on those clams. Fencing is a similar strategy where you set up fences to somewhat square off an area from green crabs so that they can't access that part of the flat. And both of these can be useful tools for protecting soft shell clams in a small area, but when they're scaled up, they do become less effective. Also, both of these strategies do nothing to reduce green crab populations. So as green crab populations continue to grow, as they have been in the wake of climate change, these strategies will become less effective over time. So many attempts to control invasive species, including green crabs, focus on physically removing them from the ecosystem with the overall goal of eradication or population reduction where that's not possible. These types of strategies are exemplified by various green crab mitigation programs that have already been tried. A couple of these are the Ipswich Bounty Program in Massachusetts, which was started in 2013. This program used state funds to pay fishers to trap green crabs, and most of these caught green crabs were disposed of just through composting. These kind of programs can get a lot of green crabs out of the water, but because green crabs reproduce so quickly, it doesn't always make a huge impact over time and basically just costs a lot of money to keep it continually running. So I am less inclined to recommend a bounty program similar to this just because it's so expensive to run. Another kind of removal program was the Gone Crabbin program in Canada. This was a pretty innovative way to combine the tourism industry with green crab mitigation. It happened in Kejimkujik National Park in Nova Scotia, where they started this tourist experience where visitors can pay to go out on a boat and haul in green crab traps. And the program helped support the green crab removal efforts that the park was also doing, while also raising awareness to tourists. This is closer to being a self-perpetuating program because it brings in money for the park's work, but it still lacks a clear use for the crabs that were caught from it. The park also had a general green crab removal and eelgrass restoration effort, which did have some success, but again, these kind of removal programs need to be constantly funded if they're going to be effective. And as soon as you stop removing green crabs from that area, they'll simply come back in. And a lot of the biological factors of the green crabs that I mentioned, like their extremely fast rates of reproduction, and also something known as the Hydra effect, often render physical removal efforts like this inadequate. The Hydra effect is a recent discovery about green crab biology that changes how we understand their population dynamics and has implications for how we decide to manage them going forward. This phenomenon was first published about last March in a study from the University of California, Davis. Researchers removed 90% of all green crabs from their study area, but found that only 1 year later, the population had actually increased to 3 times its original size. They determined that this was because green crabs cannibalized their young. So when they eradicated most of the adult green crabs, they were actually removing a key population control, and the younger generation of crabs population exploded. This discovery essentially confirms that it's impossible to eradicate green crabs without having disastrous consequences. This study was done on a newly invaded population of green crabs on the West Coast. So it's a little uncertain if their population would behave the same way somewhere like Maine, where green crab populations have been for a much longer time. But taking into consideration the possibility of the Hydra effect, our goal should switch from trying to eradicate green crabs to maintaining them at a lower population, which the study did confirm would allow native species and eelgrass to still recover. The Maine Green Crab Task Force, which some of you may be familiar with, issued their report in 2015 and was Maine's largest statewide effort to combat green crabs. The task force made many recommendations, including a green crab composting program, a green crab trap loaning program, and a specific targeted removal program. But unfortunately, all of these proved too expensive and labor intensive to continue for a significant amount of time. I spoke with one of the former task force members, Fiona de Koning, who said that the task force had been a useful tool to get people working on this issue at the time. And it was still a valuable endeavor, even if it didn't produce a clear solution to such a difficult problem. Taking into account the need to do something to lessen green crab impacts on our environment and economy, coupled with the futility of attempts to eradicate them, mitigating green crabs requires solutions that both take pressure off clams, native crabs, and eelgrass, while also not demanding excess funds that would have little overall impact. I see establishing markets for green crabs as striking this kind of ideal middle ground between those things. A green crab market could benefit the state in many ways. First and foremost, it would create a self-supporting incentive to continuously remove green crabs from the water, which would potentially bring their populations down to a less damaging level. It would also supply a supplementary income to participating harvesters, some of which may have been affected by the clam decline or could be affected by a lobster decline in the future. This would also add green crabs to the roster of Maine's fisheries, diversifying our fisheries overall. And some of those may have been affected by the clam decline, so this would just bolster our fisheries overall. Removing green crabs could take pressure off clam, lobster, and native crab populations, allowing those to recover. So I think a green crab market is a truly viable option for Maine and probably the most effective way to face this issue. There's many examples of invasive species being turned into successful culinary markets that we can look to. One of them being the Asian carp. Asian carp are a fish introduced to the United States in the 1970s to purify water reservoirs in the Midwest. And since then, they've moved their way up the Mississippi River and now threaten to infest the Great Lakes. Asian carp frequently leap up to 12 feet out of the water, which is dangerous for both commercial and recreational boaters and harms both of those industries. They also outcompete commercially fished species, causing further damage to those economies. States in the Mississippi Basin affected by Asian carp have used a series of federally funded grant programs, such as the Asian Carp Market Value Program in Illinois, which gives financial assistance to people working to create Asian carp products and processing facilities that support development of the Asian carp market. Through programs like this, states have been able to establish a functioning market around Asian carp and Asian carp value-added products. Another example of a culinary market for aquatic invasive species is the lionfish in Florida. Lionfish are voracious predators that obliterate native fish populations and damage coral reefs. Their venomous spines make them very difficult to catch and process. And so to combat the lionfish invasion, Florida has held regular incentivized spearfishing derbies. And they've also established a partnership with Whole Foods. So now every Whole Foods location in Florida sells lionfish. Another interesting thing with the lionfish is there's a nonprofit called Robots in Service of the Environment that has developed a robot that can track down and catch lionfish at depths that divers can't reach with spears. Both Asian carp and lionfish present these particular processing challenges because Asian carp are very bony fish and lionfish have their venomous spines. But the affected states have been able to overcome these by leaning into new innovations and getting the public involved. These examples show us that it's possible to overcome the stigma of eating unfamiliar species and to develop functioning, successful markets around invasives. And they offer hope that the same can be done for green crabs. So there's several possible uses for green crabs that could become markets, including compost and fertilizer, bait, pet food, and of course, a culinary market. And all of these have different price points that would make them realistic. A Canadian study from 2015 found that in a dedicated green crab trapping fishery, the price per pound needed would be about $1 United States dollars for soft shell green crabs. And a study by William Walter at the University of New England found that the minimum price that fishers would accept for a hard shell green crab fishery would also be around $1 a pound. There are existing bait markets for green crabs, mostly in southern New England and New York for the tautog fisheries. And these are around 40 to 50 cents per pound of green crab, which is still enough to be viable since it's run as a high volume fishery. A recent NOAA report also found that harvesters currently selling green crabs to restaurants are able to get $3 per soft shell green crab, which comes out to about $30 a pound. And this is obviously a lot higher than any of these benchmarks that have been set. All of these scenarios are definitely possible for Maine and show that a green crab market is definitely feasible. However, before we get to that point, there will be some hurdles to get over. Transportation of invasive species across state lines is a kind of a gray area that's uncertain because different states have different rules about these things, and that could provide any number of unknown challenges as we kind of forge ahead with a green crab market. Green crabs themselves also have particular processing challenges that we will need to overcome. They're much smaller than the typical crabs people eat, which means that picking the meat off of a hard shell green crab is incredibly labor intensive for a small amount of payoff. In Italy, this is worked around by using green crabs only in their soft shell form so that the entire crab can be eaten. But a soft shell fishery will require education of harvesters on how to catch and process them in that way, which I'll touch on more later. As of now, there's no existing supply or demand for green crabs in Maine, which means that we'll be building a market from the ground up. And as I mentioned, there is an existing bait market for green crabs in southern New England and New York, which could supplement the new culinary market in Maine, but we'd again have to contend with this transportation issue and just being far away from there, getting the crabs across state lines and all of that. Looking at other states' approaches to green crabs can give us ideas for how it might work in Maine. Massachusetts, their overall aim with green crabs has been to expand access to the fishery and get as many people removing as many crabs as possible. To achieve this, they've made it so that anyone who wants to trap green crabs for either recreational or commercial purposes can do so, as long as they notify the Department of Marine Fisheries, which then grants them a free letter of authorization to fish green crabs. They also created the Ipswich Bounty Program that I mentioned earlier, which used state funding to incentivize green crab removal at 40 cents a pound, which is a going rate for bait green crabs. Another interesting thing Massachusetts did was to actually remove green crabs from their list of edible crabs, which keeps them from being subject to the more strict regulations for crabs and lobsters. Massachusetts has a much closer connection with the existing green crab bait markets than we do in southern New England and New York, and that's helped them get their fishery moving. So if we established a connection with that bait market, we might also be able to do the same thing. Massachusetts also has earmarked state funds for a grant program that supports green crab market development, very similar to what was done for Asian carp, and I think that's a successful strategy. Although not all of these things are directly applicable to Maine, Massachusetts provides a good example of how our neighbors are working on the green crab problem, and by working with them towards the same goal, we could both make progress. A really promising green crab innovation that I've come across is using them to make biodegradable plastics. Audrey Moores, a researcher and professor at McGill University in Canada, developed a method for creating bioplastics from the substance chitin, which is found in crustacean shells. And she developed it without using harsh chemicals that are usually needed for bioplastics. She partnered with Parks Canada and the Kejimkujik National Park to apply her technique to green crabs. I think this is a fantastic use for green crabs that could be even coupled with a culinary green crab market as a useful waste stream if bioplastic production got scaled up. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Now back to the soft shell technique. Harvesting green crabs when they're in their soft shell form is the traditional way that they're used in Italy, where they're native to. This allows the entire body of the crab to be eaten without the need for processing the meat or picking it out of such small crabs. It's a much more profitable way to use green crabs, but it also requires in-depth knowledge of their molting seasons and how to identify and process crabs that are about to molt. The signs of pre-molt green crabs are very subtle, but they can be identified. Gray shadows begin to appear around the underbelly plates of the crabs, which you can see a little bit in this image. It's very faint. Marissa McMahon of the nonprofit organization Manomet that I interned with teaches workshops to seafood harvesters and other interested people on how to identify pre-molt green crabs. This is one of the resources she distributes showing how to look for pre-molt green crabs. Once pre-molt crabs are selected, they're held in celled cages until they molt and become soft-shelled. When it looks like there's 2 crabs in a single cell, that means that it's shed its hard shell and is ready to be distributed as a soft shell crab. Although this technique is unfamiliar to harvesters in the United States, it can definitely be taught, and it is already. It's definitely the most promising way to use green crabs for a culinary purpose and is very much worth pursuing. So as we move forward with the challenges of green crab management, I believe that aiming towards a culinary market should be our overall goal. This could be helped along by funding by funding to support green crab innovations like bioplastics and new processing techniques, training on soft shell harvesting, education about green crabs, and market development in general. To get past the challenges of green crab transportation, we should promote communication between states on green crab market goals and work together to make the process as smooth as possible. We should avoid putting resources towards removal efforts that lack a self-perpetuating element like a market and will have a lower impact. I also think it's very valuable to encourage recreational green crab harvesting. It's very easy to find green crabs in the seaweed along the rocky beaches of Maine. And if we get more people doing it and more people become familiar with it as a food item, all the better. Green crabs, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So it only makes sense to be as resourceful with them as possible while we're working to lessen their impacts. Our shores are now teeming with what many see as a delicacy. And if we jump on this opportunity, green crabs can become an asset to our state and give us another opportunity to be a leader in this climate change fight. I'd like to thank everyone that helped me with this research, especially my advisors, Dr. Melcher and Dr. Jesse Miner, and Representative Allison Hepler for all their support through the research process this past year. Also, Marissa McMahon for mentoring me in my internship with Manomet and offering me her expertise on green crabs and green crab markets, as well as Jared Silva from the Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries and Fiona DeConing from the Maine Green Crab Task Force for being willing to be interviewed about their experience with green crabs. Thank you all for your time and consideration today. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Eve. That's fascinating. Great pictures too. Representative Bloom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Eve, I'm inspired by your presentation. And I think, Representative McCrate, that we should have a green crab lunch by we should eat it and try it out. So what do you say, Eve? You think you can get us a chef to do that?
I think I can figure that out. Sure.
I'm serious. I think we definitely should do it. I love soft shell crab. Have you had it?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
That
do
would
it.
Let's do that for a coastal caucus too.
Yes, absolutely. When we're back seeing each other, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Let's find. Do you have chefs that you work with or that you've worked with in this program?
I don't have any personally myself, but I can definitely get in touch with Marissa McMahon, who has all of these contacts and get her connected with you guys.
Thank you.
We'll supply the plates.
Sounds good.
Representative Hepler.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Eve, for a great presentation. You've done a lot of research on this. And I just wanted to point out, speaking about the marketing, I believe there was going to be an effort to provide green crabs at the dining hall, but I guess that didn't work out.
That's kind of a product of the transportation issues, just getting them up from the coast, and also having a certified vendor for green crabs, which we don't have yet.
Okay, next time.
Yeah.
So Eve, where are you in the process? Are you finishing at UMaine, or are you?
I'm a junior this year.
You're a junior, so you have more time to cook green crab. I was going to ask you, about other uses, and you answered that, like fertilizer. Also fascinating that too good work can create a bad result. Too many removed, the Hydra effect. That's fascinating. So finding the balance. I believe Cole Canwet is still with us, and I wonder, Cole, do you have any feedback on anything the department is involved with around this? If you're still here, and if you don't,
I'm moving Cole back in.
Okay.
From the attendees. So,
do you know Cole, Eve?
I do not.
Okay, she's with the department and is the public health and the person I go to around fish questions. Well, any comments?
Yeah, sorry, it takes a minute to get swapped back over to a panelist. No, I mean, I think it's a great presentation. I enjoyed watching the YouTube presentation that was also available. You did a great job. So I think that, you know, you mentioned fencing and netting, and in the Green Crab Task Force report, we did say that fencing is really not effective. It's extremely expensive, very time consuming, and isn't particularly effective. Netting can work in some areas, but scaling up to, say, like a municipal shellfish program, that the level that they would need to provide resource for an entire town program is also very difficult. We have been seeing in some areas like Brunswick that there is a shift between, and I mentioned this in my previous presentation, that there is a shift between species from softshell clams, which are very vulnerable to green crab predation because their two shells, they don't fully close, and they're also soft, like the name implies. And so hard clams, where climate change is providing an opportunity for hard clams to become more prevalent, they are more predator resistant. They do close completely. They don't have a gap in their shell, and their shells, like the name implies, are harder. So there is, you know, potential advantage there. I mean, it's not gonna save or reverse the loss of the soft shell clam fishery. And I think that to some degree we'll continue to be living through these cycles of, you know, increased predation, reduced, you know, increment, you know, periodically by, say, cold winters or something else. And until the economics of maybe harvesting green crabs are figured out in a high volume, meaningful way, it's going to be tough to get people focused on that. There are also other issues that, you know, need to be considered. Like there is a potential parasite that, you know, promoting green crabs as bait, say, is potentially risky because they can have a parasite that we're not sure if it could impact lobsters or not. So some of that work needs to also be investigated. But like other states, we have tried to streamline and make things as easy as possible so that if people did want to harvest green crabs, that they definitely could.
Great, thank you, Cole. Representative Hutchins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a constituent of mine who tried the green crab in different ways to get rid of it in a very small cove, and he said he could not harvest enough to make fewer because it made them healthier and healthier and healthier. So he went the opposite route and left them totally alone for a year, and they overproduced so much that most of them died. So just a piece of information, that's all, to go along with Eve's nice little presentation there. That was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's a great example of one solution may not be it for everything. Interesting. Representative Bloom, is your hand up again or still up? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Eve, can you give us an update when you, are you going to continue the study, or is this the final result?
I'm close. This is basically the end of my time researching, but
okay,
more may be to come.
Yeah, yeah. If you get any more information, let us know. That's fascinating. Great work. Really impressive. Yeah, I wasn't doing that stuff as a junior. Very impressive. Thanks again. Thanks so much, and thanks, Representative Hepler, for making that happen. So that's the end of our presentations, and just a little housekeeping before we go. Linda has some information for us about folders, and I just wanted to highlight the calendar a little bit. So Linda.
Yes, I am actually making folders again this year for all of the members. I have them in the file cabinet behind the horseshoe for those that want to pick them up and have hard copies. Once you take them out, they're your responsibility. I will be updating testimony as it comes in. If you've taken your folder and testimony comes in after the fact, I will have a separate file in the front of that particular LD number with additional testimony that you can come in and pick up as well to complete your file. If you have any questions on that, let me know, and I'll try to help give you more information on it. Just one other thing I wanted to mention, if it's all right, is I see that Representative Hutchins is actually in the House chamber today. If you are, because of backgrounds, it's hard to tell where people are sometimes. If you are here on campus, please let me know. So I'm sending in the attendance sheet properly, so you get whatever it is that you need to get. And that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. I wanted to also thank Lynn for setting this up. We let Lynn know what we're looking for, and she made it happen. So thank you. This was really fascinating. Great updates, a lot of information. Just a little bit on the calendar, where next week we have briefings on aquaculture specifically, and Lynn has a little information for us about some of the work the Right to Know Committee is doing that doesn't necessarily require action from us, but is information for us to be aware of. And then at this point, it could change, but it looks like we won't meet on the 25th. The Commissioner and Senator Miramont will both be at the ASMFC meetings, and we were wanting to get an update on their work, ASMFC's, and to get the latest on the right whale issue. And it makes sense to wait till after that meeting happens. So at this point, we're just meeting Tuesdays. Unless we need it, we'll skip the 25th. And then on the 1st, we'll have that ASMFC and whale update, and we'll start on bills. We're scheduling 3 bills that day. And then the 8th, more bills and work session. And the 15th, we'll get an update from the Lobster Marketing Collaborative and some more bills, a bill. We have 1 more bill to schedule, and then work sessions. So we'll have the potential of being the first committee done. Yeah. Maybe, we'll see. We'll see. And then if, as I asked Commissioner Kelleher today, if there are budget issues, we'll do what we need to do. There also, Lynn has provided, I don't know if this has gone to everybody, but provided us a list of reports that we may expect. And some we might want to hear about, some will just be paper that we can, or online that we can read through and be aware of. So that, we haven't scheduled anything for those, but that could change our dates a little bit. We'll see. We, as a committee, met with the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee around the airboat issue. And the committee heard a report back yesterday. They forgot to invite us, but the committee's going to work on it on Wednesday, I believe. Is that right, Representative Hepler?
I think what we were going to do on Wednesday was just sort of figure out what our next steps with, because we had a number of report backs and statuses. I don't expect anything and certainly if we were going to use Representative Sachs's bill to put forward something, it wouldn't be then. So
yeah, okay.
If anything changes, I'll send you a quick.
Okay, thanks. And of course, the bill isn't, you can report out a bill already if you choose to. The stakeholder group, if you're interested, the airboats are a big issue in my part of the world more, and Allison has had some communication about them, and then below where I live. But it's an issue of access to the flats and for shellfish harvesters. And the idea was to continue the stakeholder group of harvesters, coastal landowners, Marine Patrol, and Game Warden, because Inland Fisheries oversees watercraft, and municipal officers from a couple of the towns. And that was a really productive process. It was tense at the beginning. It was very well done, and there was a real coming together of the minds to just try to reduce the noise. And I kept stressing to address the issue of access. So lots of good work happened. There may be outcomes. The recommendations were about muffling and looking at prop orientation, things to reduce the noise and to do sound testing in a consistent manner. So that's my update. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? No. Okay, so next Tuesday, who's that? Representative Bloom?
It's Georgie, my puppy dog.
Oh, hi Georgie.
We've been at this for a long time.
That's the best part of Zoom. You can have your animals. Okay, well, thank everybody for your attention. Lynn, did you want to add anything before we close?
I do not, just reminding you that you need an official motion to adjourn.
Oh, could I have a motion to adjourn? Representative Bailey? And a second? Representative Hepler. Okay, and then next time we'll have briefings. It's going to be really important. I mean, the briefings I think are fascinating. I hope everybody's here, but especially when we get to bills, we're going to need our quorum. And so
when are we meeting again? When's our next meeting? The 17th? Next
The
week.
18th.
Great.
Okay, and you'll get notices from Lynn and Linda. The calendar has gone out to people or not? Yes. Or this calendar, the other kind of calendar has gone out. And you'll keep us up to date. So next week.
Yay.
Everybody.
Bye.